At 6 o'clock, welcome to the August 16th meeting of the governing body. If you will give your attention to Councilwoman Hannah Nager, who will provide the invocation, stand as you are able, and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Join me in the attitude of prayer and meditation. God, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion, allow us to grow closer as a group, and nurture the bonds of this community. Fill us with your grace as we make decisions that affect our city. And continue to remind us that all we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit of truth and for the service of community in our community. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call the meeting to order, and if the clerk would read the roll, please.
Mayor Padilla.
Here.
Council members Hiller. Here. Valdivia Aquila.
Here.
Ortiz.
Here.
Emerson. Kale.
Here.
Nager.
Here.
Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Lesser.
Here.
We have 9 present.
Okay. Is Councilman Emerson online? I can't see him.
I'm not seeing him.
Okay. All right, we will move to a proclamation that I have here, and I'd like to be joined by all the representatives who have taken part in this Washburn Tech Skills. Join me. If you could join me, I appreciate it. Circle around, squeeze in where you can. Watch that step. This is a certificate of recognition for Washburn Tech Skills USA winners. Winners, I stress. Washburn Tech sent 28 competitors to the Skills USA Championship June 20th through the 24th in Atlanta, Georgia. 6 students won medals in this national competition, which is a testament to their abilities and hard work, as well as to their advisors and instructors who dedicate themselves to training tomorrow's workforce. Holly Hoffer of Centralia won gold in the first aid CPR competition in the college post-secondary division. Melinda Thompson of Barrington won gold in the medical math competition in the college post-secondary division. A team of students claimed silver in the Health Knowledge Bowl in the college post-secondary division. Team members included Shayla Borsdorf from Burlingame, Jessica Dunn of Topeka, Chastel Height, Topeka, and William Ross of Delia. All medalists graduated from Washburn Tech Practical Nursing Program in May. The Skills USA Championship is an annual competition that showcases the best career and technical education students in the nation. More than 5,200 contestants, all state winners, competed in hands-on in 108 different trade, technical, and leadership skills. Nearly 2,000 judges and contestant organizers from labor and management make the national event possible. Congratulations to these talented competitors from Washburn Tech, whose goal is to train and prepare a highly skilled workforce that can sustain and grow our economy. In witness whereof, I do hereby affix my official seal and signature in the seal of City of Topeka, Kansas, on the 16th day of August, 2022, Michael A. Padilla, Mayor. Congratulations to everyone who participated in this competition. I think Washburn Tech has done wonders for the workforce, not just for this city, but preparing people to find those skills and careers and hopefully stay here in Topeka or go out and get educated in higher levels and then come back to Topeka. So Washburn does a great job in doing that. Congratulations, Dr. Farley, and to everyone here who has joined us. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment? Anyone? Okay. Would you like to, sir? Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say about this organization, it's a fantastic program that complements our college, and it's been enforced for, well, I've been here since 2008, and many of our gold medal winners and even place finishers participants are right here in the city using those skills to further their career and to engage with the community and share their talents. I want to say one more thing, just to put a exclamation point on this. Since 2008, this organization has earned 745 medals at Washburn Tech. And at the national level, we have earned over 22 national awards since 2008, and we've had numerous state officers and one national officer. This is an organization that benefits our young people, and it needs to continue and develop, and it will continue and develop for this community. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I hope that you are as proud of these students and the ones that are not here with us tonight as we are. We think that this is an essential component of the education process that we offer to students here in Topeka and in Kansas. We know that if we can get this kind of person, this quality of person, this training that these people have, we can't go wrong. We want to make certain that people in the community understand how important it is. These students will pave the way for those that come after them. And people will say, that's a Washburn Tech graduate. And there will be other students that will be so excited to be a part of this that enrollment will grow, and we will not be having some of the problems in the medical particularly that you see this month. We want to make sure that everyone knows what a great program we have at Washburn Institute of Technology. Thank you for your support, and thank you for your support, Mayor, and all of the council here tonight. We want to make sure that you understand that we're doing this for the community, and I think we're succeeding with these children, with these people. Thank you.
For the students. That's a fun part of this job, is being able to recognize students that are doing so well in our community. We'll move on now to item number 3 in the agenda. If the clerk would read.
First presentation we have this evening is Financial Services Quarterly Report.
City Manager.
At this time, I'll call Josh McInerney forward to present the quarterly report from Finance.
Good evening, Mayor, governing body. Tonight we'll be going over the 2022 Quarter 2 financial summary. And then on your screen right now is a summary, an income statement of all the funds in the city. 2 takeaways of note are fees for service appears under budget compared to 2022 actuals. That is because we have not collected the higher utility revenues for this month since they occur in July, August, and September. And then additionally, the biogas facility is not operational at this point. There's a compressor issue, and we're also trying to make sure that our safety standards meet Southern Star's requirement. And we're hoping that facility appears online later this month. And then additionally, as you can see, there was bond refunding done last year, so our 2021 actual revenues and expenses revenues are way over 21 compared to 2022, and expenses are way under on 22 compared to 21. And that's just because of the bond refunding that we did in the prior year. So moving on to the next slide, this is an income statement for the general fund. Really nothing's changed since the first quarter. One thing of note, personnel being under budget is amplified due to the timing of pay periods. So as the time goes throughout the year, that should even out, but we will still be under budget overall on the year. And then, Mr. Mayor, you asked for an update on from our grant writer. Although we have not been awarded any grants thus far, her and city staff are working diligently to apply for anything and everything that we can, and even reaching out to nonprofits on stuff they can apply for. So that's what the nonprofit grants, that figure means. So if we think that the YWCA can apply for a grant, we recommend something that they apply for, and they apply for it. And then some of the grants she wanted to note that were in process are the EPA, or that we are applied for and waiting to hear back for, the EPA lead line grant, the state Spark grants, and then the RAISE grant, which was submitted in April. And then last but not least, the vendor diversity report for Q2. One thing that, if the public reads, it will jump out, is that why is our total dollars paid to all vendors so much lower in Q2 compared to Q1? That's because we have not billed for construction during this next upcoming construction season, so that trend fits in line with what's been happening in previous years. So just thought we'd make that point of clarification. Then lastly, contracts procurement did host a recent luncheon with potential business owners who are interested in doing with the business with the city, and hopes to gain more applicants in the future for contracts and procurement. With that, we'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Josh? Councilwoman Valdivia-Acla.
Well, you took it down really quick, but that luncheon that you were talking about, is that the second or third one? Because my understanding was, I think that there was a luncheon to try to get small minority vendors on board since last year, and I'm wondering if this is a continuation of that program.
This is a continuation of that, but I can't remember off the top of my head if this is the second or third one. So we can, no, I'll reach out to our contracts procurement and we'll get that number back to you. Yeah, when we'll get that to the city manager and he'll let you know.
Further questions for Josh? None? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Brenda?
The second presentation we have is the Planning and Development Quarterly Report.
City manager.
At this time, I'll call Mr. Fine forward and present the presentation on the quarterly report.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager, Your Honor, governing body. Pleased to present what ends up being our mid-year report for planning and development. Tonight, as usual, we'll go over the permit trends, including residential and commercial, to give you an idea of development activity in the city this year so far, our top 10 permits, as well as some department updates there at the end. Building permit-wise, total is down compared to last year, in about 13% in terms of total number of permits. It's only off 5% from our 5-year average, but if you look at that graph, the blue line is residential, and you see that blue line going down. The red line is steady, that's commercial. So that's where most of the regression in permits is coming from. In fact, all of it is from residential, which really tracks and is tracking with what we're seeing over the last year and a half. Housing starts slowing, construction materials, and interest rates rising. You're getting less housing starts, as is also reflected when we look at our housing units, which is housing starts. We're projecting 94 by the end of this year to be permitted within the city. As to give you some idea, we had 394 at the end of last year. Of course, those last 2 years were kind of outliers. We were really trending upwards the last couple of years with almost 700 new units started in 20 and 21. But again, this is what we're seeing across really the nation in terms of housing starts. And we don't have any large multifamily or even moderate multifamily projects, which really drives those numbers when they go up. So this is all pretty much single family and two family development. Okay, and the next slide, you can see the kind of the same regression, if you will, in terms of the number, or I should say the share of units that are created in the county. The city has a 50% share of all the units created in the county so far this year. That was our historical trend in the last decade, except for the last 2 years where we really began to increase our share up to 75% with, again, more multifamily projects drives that number. So just to give you an idea, if we did bring the Flywheel project online this year to get permitted, we'd be right back up into the 75% share of all units in the county. We'd be right back up to our at least our last 2 year average, probably the second highest year since the recession. So one project really makes a big difference in these numbers. We've cleaned up some of our tracking of future residential lots, tried to put more of a real number on it. This just looks at our future residential capacity for single and two family lots. We broke it down between buildable and planned. So buildable are where we have about 5 years worth of lots out there for future single two-family development. Those are ready. Those are ready to be built. Those are shovel ready. Basically, they have a benefit district attached to them where they have streets. The planned would be those are platted lots and zones since 1970. Those are what we call more prime. And we have about 10 years worth of those that could graduate eventually with a benefit district into that buildable category. Pivoting over to commercial, as I noted, staying the course with commercial activity compared to last year. Really no changes projected in terms of the number of permits. It's a little bit less than our 5-year average, but again, not really staying the course with commercial activity in the city. The permit value has come down. Again, we're not seeing the large projects this year or a combination of some large projects that really drive those values. So we're down about 14% if we project out to the end of the year at this pace. Some of those the highly valued projects that are our top 10. That first one you all know about, the Mars Project Y, $28 million value. That is far and away the highest valued permit we have. We did have some other noteworthy permits in that top 10, such as the McDonald's rebuild at 29th in California. Stormontville has a couple additions, one to their cancer center, and then also a new daycare for what they call building blocks. And then we have a new brewery or microbrewery potentially opening up, which is under renovation at 45th and Topeka, roughly, the old skating rink, 785 Beer Company. So watch for that. Okay. I got to click it again. I'll do that. All right, so finishing up with our division updates. First off, we've been sharing a pre-application tracker with you occasionally this year, which is our up-and-coming development proposals, where we meet before they ever apply for permits or planning approvals. So we had 51 meetings to date, and about a quarter of those have gone to permit stage or construction at this point. In planning, a couple things to highlight. Futures 2045, that's our regional transportation plan. That was adopted by the MTPO this spring. We do that every 5 years. We also, we being the Planning Commission, has also initiated a code amendment, what we're coining the missing middle zoning code amendments. Missing middle, that is roughly anything between 2 and 20 units, housing units. So not single family, not larger multifamily. Those, that sweet spot or that missing middle, our inventory is low. It also can address our attainable and affordable housing needs, as was pointed out in the housing study. So you see this a lot across the country now, a lot of cities, even states mandating, requiring their single-family zoning to open up to potential second units. We're going to do an accessory dwelling unit survey here in another week or so, community-wide, to gauge interest as to whether or not that is something we should remove some barriers in our zoning code to help advance. So that's something to look forward to eventually come to you. On the housing services side, a couple of things you probably already know about: the property maintenance rehab grants that was awarded by Federal Home Loan Bank, $750,000. We get to continue that program to rehab code violations on the property maintenance side. It's a great program. It's helped 50 households since it was enacted 3+ years ago. So we're looking to actually, we have a waiting list, so we're actually looking to move that waiting list along with some shifting of staff as well. Equity Access Shelter, that is a new homeless initiative that we're trying to get off the ground. The mayor and Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala have been very supportive of. There'll be more to report, I think, in the next quarter. But right now, this is, suffice to say, a single point of contact in housing services that will work with the homeless support agencies to help provide enhanced service for our at-risk homeless population. And then to wind up development services, we're on track this year to bring you the new updates to the fire code and the building code. So that's on track by the end of this year. And then more exciting news, I think. The city is potentially going to be considered for FEMA's community rating system. What is that? What does that mean? It is a certification of our floodplain and our stormwater programs and codes that will result, if we get accepted, into discounted flood insurance rates across the entire city. So we are thinking this could be a minimum of 10%, maybe up to 20% or more if we get accepted. So there's a range that they will come review. I don't think we've ever done this, but we've done a lot of behind-the-scenes work to get to this point and get accepted to even be looked at. So that's, I want to commend Richard Faulkner and Development Services for moving that along. Oops. And then lastly, I'll just share with you our mid-year survey findings for the building permit customer satisfaction. We have received some fairly high remarks. We've received high marks and high remarks from 80 to 92% satisfaction rate for our customer service application and overall experience. Have a fairly strong returning customer experience where they are indicating things are getting better. This does not indicate anything that this is perfect. In fact, I've included some comments in there. We get very constructive comments as well as positive comments that we take to heart and want to learn from, and we have to get better. So that's a good start to at least to that survey and this year, and we'll continue that throughout the rest of this year and come back with the final results. For those who want to have more information on those numbers I presented earlier, all you have to do is Google DGM reports Topeka, and you'll find a whole host of numbers on the building permit trends that you didn't even know we had. So with that, I'll stand for any questions that you may have.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. A comment and then a question, Mr. Fyander. One is that I'm sure you've probably done a little bit of a deep dive into the new program that we're looking at possibly for equity access shelter, even though it is not specific to what we were looking at initially when we were first talking about Built for Zero with the mayor and other staff members. What is so impactful about it for the future of the program, as you know, is that the single point of entry. So I have been sitting in, as has the mayor, on some of these meetings, and I believe that the mayor, as well as myself, and staff, especially Corey and her crew, have a real sense that this could be a game changer with the chronic unsheltered that has, is at the level, I believe, of crisis proportion, and helping them in a way that can really start changing up our numbers. So I just wanted to say thank you to you and to Corey and her staff, because they've been hustling on it. And it seems that there has been a lot of affirming dialogue as they look at that transition into this, some different change-ups in the programming. But then my question would come also is, what type of customer service training ongoing does your department receive?
The ongoing customer service training would be through, there's nothing uniform or about it. We usually do individualized training that's offered through our HR department. And we hire some really good people to put out front that come equipped. For those that we all need a brush up or two every now and then, we have those training paths for them through our organization. So it's individualized.
Got it. Thank you.
Further questions for Mr. Finder? Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know what slide number it was, but I want to do a compliment and then ask a question. It's really nice to see those customer service numbers. I think we all on the council, people know if they have a complaint to call us. We don't always get the compliments, and so good that you're doing that too, because it does tell you a lot. So
yeah, I don't think we've done that before. So this was enlightening.
good. Yeah. I had a question about the permits for housing. It was about your third slide and so on. Just so I've got my bearings on what I'm looking at, and maybe others would be interested as well. Because you did a good job of talking about, I mean, it really can go up and down if you've got a big unit.
Right.
But when I was just looking at that and wondering about it and penciling, within the last 2 or 3 years, we put Calamar online with 100-some units, the Holodome online with 100-some units.
We haven't done that one yet.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, because some of these have, Casson came online and is done with the new and the rehab, and then Wheatfields came online, and there was a hotel, and I don't know if that goes under residential or commercial, and then they're doing apartments, and so just... Did they get on your chart only thinking of Calamar the first time they pull permits, or what does that mean to us in terms of
Sure.
active projects?
Sure. Yeah, how we count, Councilwoman Hiller, is that as soon as that project is permitted and approved and issued, then we count it. Normally, they all get built within their construction timeline. We don't go back, take them out if they've delayed it all, and then put them back into the, this year when they get completed. We count them the initial time they are permitted. So, yeah, Calamar would have been 2 years ago.
So even though, for instance, that activity might finally happen this year,
We don't count that, yeah. We don't count that in 2022.
it only shows up in 2020 or whatever.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm not, when our numbers aren't super high, a number like 10% isn't really a big deal, I think. So I like to overplay the variance. It's nice to see the action.
Yeah, we track these, month to month, and we see the we can kind of see it coming. It's not as robust. And you get interest rates, you get construction materials going up, and you can just see, okay, I wouldn't project it to be a strong year, but you also have some projects that were in the pipeline that people were working on, and they slow down too. And so, so it could be a slow year this year, and then it could just bounce up because everybody's saved up for next year. So
Yeah.
we'll see. Thank you. Mhm.
Thank you.
Further questions for Mr. Finder? Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Bill,
sir.
appreciate it. The clerk will read.
Our third presentation is from the Topeka Police Department Behavioral Health Unit Update.
Mr. City Manager?
Mayor, governing body, this was a presentation requested by a council member, and at this time, I'll call up Major Russ Klump with the Topeka Police Department to do the presentation on the behavioral health unit.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be giving a general overview of the Topeka Police Department's Behavioral Health Unit. I'll start off with a couple of definitions of some terms that are oftentimes confused with one another and sometimes interchanged improperly. So just for general understanding, the Crisis Intervention Team is an international concept for intervening, when possible, with persons in a crisis of mental illness that is presented as behavior or ideology, bringing them into contact with law enforcement. The Behavioral Health Unit is a cooperation between Vallejo and the City of Topeka, composing a unit specially designed to address mental illness-based behaviors that are potentially life-endangering or could lead to criminal behavior. The idea behind this is to avoid incarceration of the mentally ill when possible and to apply services to those when incarceration is necessary and in those cases. A big piece of this is also response, de-escalation, those kinds of things as well. We currently have 197 officers that are CIT trained. This means they have the basic 40-hour course of crisis intervention training. They received that instruction here. On the screen, you'll see a list of that curriculum. And on the right-hand side is the instructor affiliation. You'll notice that we have a wide range of instructor affiliations that compose this training. 197 officers currently trained in CIT. That means that on every shift, 24 hours a day, every day of the year, there's CIT trained officers on the streets to respond to these situations. Now the BHU, the Behavioral Health Unit, is composed of a portion of those officers who have received additional field experience and some specialized instruction on the back-end processes of mental illness, particularly with the process of intake. So if we have to do a voluntary or involuntary intake, those officers are more trained to do that portion of the thing. Again, the BHU is a composition. It's an agreement between the Vallejo co-responders and our specially trained officers. The group is led by a sergeant who works closely with the Vallejo liaison, who's also the CIT coordinator. We run on two shifts currently, first shift and second shift. The first shift we have two officers, one which is a standard BHU officer, the other one is a BHU officer who focuses on the homeless outreach. Currently, that officer is on military leave, so the sergeant is handling those duties for the homeless outreach. But hopefully we'll have that officer back soon off of military duty, and we can plug that back in. You'll notice that there's a co-responder on first shift provided by Vallejo, and on second shift we have a BHU officer and a co-responder as well. Our agreement with Vallejo provides two co-responders, one for each of those shifts, as well as up to two weekend responders, co-responders for the weekend. So here's the general deployment. The co-responder deployment, ideally, and the mainstay of the program is to have a co-responder and a BHU officer teamed up together, available for calls, responding to calls of crisis in which there's a life-endangering situation, those kinds of things. They also do a lot of follow-up on crisis situations where officers have had contact with persons who may just need a little more assistance, who may just need some guidance in which resources to use from the community, those types of things. They do a lot of follow-up in that regard as well. Secondarily, if a BHU officer is not available, then the co-responder can be paired with a patrol officer. Again, we have many, many patrol officers that are CIT trained, and they can pair up with the co-responder and fulfill that need as well. A co-responder can self-deploy. They do have vehicles, they have police radios, they can self-deploy to calls and assist with calls as well. This is an option when a BHU officer is not available. They can deploy in this manner. And it is also the standard deployment on weekends when the co-responders are on the weekend duty. This is a generalized budget for the behavioral health unit. Just a few notes on this. You'll see in the current remaining column, it shows no expenditure for the first shift responder and no expenditure for the co-responders. This is the 2022 numbers. And the reason that they're the way they are is because Vallejo has experienced some attrition and some turnover. And so we didn't have those co-responders. Those have all been filled now. The only ones that are currently posted and unfilled are the weekend co-responders. And so we're waiting to fill those. So the unit is getting back up to full speed again, and these numbers that you see here will be changing in accordance with that. So some of the program benefits. Again, we use a co-responder model here in Topeka. There's numerous different models that can be used. To my understanding that when this program was built, those other models were examined and reviewed, and pieces were taken from those to form what would fit best in Topeka. I could tell you that the co-responder model that we currently use has shown to be very effective and very efficient. There's models out there that have what you might call a parallel response, where the mental health care providers have their own field responders, and then they call in law enforcement as needed. We found that many of the contacts that we're having require a law enforcement presence, either because the situations are, by their nature, unstable and unpredictable, or there's already an element of danger involved with the situation that they're responding to. So having the co-responder and the police officer responding at the same time improves our efficiency, because with the other models, co-responder or the mental health responders, the social workers would arrive, find that they need law enforcement, have to call law enforcement, and then they would have to find a unit to respond, etc. It takes up a lot of time. Even in a mid-sized city like Topeka, those responses aren't always rapid. I can tell you that I had a car stop this morning near 29th and Croco. I asked for a backup officer to my location, and the nearest available officer was on Wanamaker Road, and it was a sergeant. So, you're looking at some elongated response times, and in those types of situations, they can be very dangerous. The program brings a lot of benefits. We are able to provide better service to these folks who are experiencing severe mental crisis. Field screening capability by the co-responders. These co-responders are operating at a level in which they can do the mental health screening process actually in the field. We don't have to take them down to the facility, wait on a screener to do that process. We can handle that in the field when it's going to be an admission type of situation. Relationship building between BHU officers and repeat high-risk consumers. We see this every day. The BHU responders are often in contact with folks in crisis repeatedly over time, and they build a relationship of trust. This is particularly true with the homeless. Those officers are in the camps nearly daily, speaking with the homeless folks there, checking on them, and those kinds of things are always building these relationships that provide an element of trust, and with trust comes cooperation and more positive outcomes out of that. The model that we use also helps us to reduce the out-of-service time for the patrol officers. In general, the patrol officers who encounter a situation where admission to a mental health facility is the better move, they're able to call on the BHU officers to come and take that over, because that process can be elongated even into multiples of hours for that process to take place. So the BHU officer and the co-responder can take that off of the patrol officer, and the patrolman can go back to doing patrol duties. There's also increased safety and services, as I said, to the homeless who choose not to use the sheltering resources such as the rescue mission. Councilwoman, you pointed to that earlier, where we do have a significant number of folks who are unsheltered and don't use the resources that are available to them in the community for a variety of reasons. They don't all have mental illness. Some of them have addiction issues and some other things involved. But the BHU officers are able to kind of bridge that gap and make those relationships. They're out there providing resources and services to them actually in the camps where they are, working hand in hand with other outreach groups, with the rescue mission, and those kinds of things as well. A new program that's looking to start up with the housing that was referred to earlier. We're already looking at ways we can plug into that and be part of that solution as well in the community. And so that's the nuts and bolts of the behavioral health unit with the police department. Just a quick overview for understanding. And I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for the major? Also, Councilwoman Valdivia Arcala.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll probably ask you, it's major, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Major questions, and then I think some other, a couple of questions may be more geared towards the chief. But specifically with the 40 hours of CIT training, where it said there was 35 hours of CIT, and then I think 5 hours out in the field, more or less.
Right. There's some field trips, for lack of a better word, to facilities, and so the officers have a better understanding of how the facilities are arranged and those resources, actually seeing it and having a tangible experience with it.
Okay, so in that training, that 35 to 40 hours usually occurs right when they're coming into the academy. Is that correct?
Currently, yes. Currently, we have embedded that into our standard academy training. So every officer that comes out of the academy with this training. Prior to that being in place, we've done that for many years. I don't know how many exactly. Prior to that, we held this training individually for officers who wanted to go to that training, or officers who are identified as being in assignments that are likely to put them in positions where they would utilize that training. And we put many officers through the training as a singularity in that regard as well.
Okay, so with the training that they attend, is this specific to Topeka Police Department CIT training, or can anyone from a different agency that is not LEO related attend this training as well?
Well, the emphasis of this training is on the law enforcement interaction. Again, the program's design is for those instances where somebody's either going to go to jail or they can get resources. And if we can get them resources, that's the better option, right? And so the training is designed around that scenario.
City Manager?
Mayor, that concept did change several years back in the aspect that community partners can attend that, and part of that is building that relationship with the community partners, and that's why they're able to attend the training as well.
So that's a yes.
that outside agencies,
Can
not
do
law
that.
enforcement may attend.
Okay.
Yes,
So-
but the focus is on those situations.
So then you would say that that 40 hours is basically really Leo-centered on de-escalation, on issues with mental health, on the escalated crisis, all the things that we saw that were involved in the training. And now outside agencies can come on board.
Yes.
Okay. And how many hours after this initial 40, say if you're new to the force and you've had the 40 hours of training, how many hours can an individual officer take to get additional classes on mental health, on emergency crisis response? How many hours can they do a year on this?
There's no regulation on the number of hours. Those types of trainings come along, so it follows the normal training and application process where the training is proposed, it goes out to all the sworn officers, and they have the ability to apply for those classes. So as they come along, those classes are offered. We also embed refreshers into our in-service training as well. And we make that part of our annual in-service to provide them a refresher on some of the concepts and some of the nuances of those things. Those trainings are unique and especially beneficial because they oftentimes stir real-world scenario conversations where they can take an incident and in the classroom and they can kind of work through that incident, talk about what works, what didn't work, those types of things as well. So we have the in-service that stands on its own, and then we also have trainings that just come along, and we're able to send officers to those.
So the in-service is mandatory training?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and how many hours would you say when you add in a mental health component that may stir, maybe use of different practices, whatever the case may be? How many hours is that a year?
It's just a few hours as part of the actual in-service process.
So maybe anywhere annually from 3 to 5 hours?
That's probably accurate, yeah.
Okay.
And that's for the in-service piece. I wouldn't have numbers for you off the top of my head on the other training as it comes along. I know there's some training that comes through.
Okay. With looking at what the BHU composition, which you ran through it pretty quick, so I got a little bit confused on here. On the page, you have BHU composition, 1 sergeant, 3 officers, 2 full-time co-responders, 2 part-time co-responders. Is that if you're totally staffed? Or
Correct.
that's where you're at right now?
Which is where we are right now, yes.
So the interviews that it was said that were going to be happening last week or the week after, those positions have been filled?
Yes.
And
Yes,
those were two positions?
Right,
that were filled?
it's my understanding that those have been filled. Again, that's Vallejo's process to fill those co-responders, so I don't have all the answers on where they are with that.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Persinger is here in the audience if he wishes to address that through their process.
Okay. Well, or I can keep on and then I can ask Bill, Mr. Persinger. So moving over to the CIT brochure, when I was looking at the partners, what exactly do the partners do that are all listed? There's something like 20 partners that are listed in your CIT pamphlet that is on the city website. What all does that partnership entail with CIT?
I'm not exactly familiar with the pamphlet, the specific pamphlet that you are.
I got it off of the website.
City Manager?
Yeah, those community partners are partners who, at the beginning of the program, when we got started, wanted to participate in a variety of reasons. One is through training, 2 as resources that are available. So when the officers are in the field and they need resources, they can contact those agencies that may have resources that they can utilize that they normally wouldn't know about. But the community partners assist in training and being available for resources when they're called.
So then the guys out in the field, guys and gals out in the field, along with the co-responders, they would have access to these different numbers to call if they were needing help or to see if mental health services were available? Is that what you're saying the use of these partnerships are?
Yeah, what they would do is normally they'd probably call dispatch and say, hey, can you connect this to whatever resource that they'd like to talk to? And that's where the co-responders also come in. There's monthly meetings as well for the CIT where the partners come together and discuss different items and issues and where they need to go. But the normal process, if that partner has something like if it's a juvenile service that's needed, they can contact Family Service and Guidance Center.
Is there some kind of database that keeps all this information so you're tracking one of the questions I was going to ask is it says here, benefits of the behavioral health unit, greater efficiency in obtaining care for persons involved in mental health crisis, reduces recidivism and arrest by diverting individuals with a mental illness to appropriate community mental health providers, and enhances officer skills in responding safely and creatively to mental health crisis situation and increases citizen confidence in reporting incidents. And this sounds wonderful. And I was wondering where your tracking is of this information to back this up.
I don't know if there's any specific tracking mechanism. What normally happens is once the scene is secure, then the crisis responder then usually takes over the call, and the police officer takes a step back and is really just there in case something happens. And then that co-responder has all those resources, and that's a lot of those are kept in the database at Vallejo as well as the police department, but they have access to those.
So, like, we're starting to learn with the Equity Access Shelter Program how important data is going to be, with data collection is going to be, how important it's going to be for folks coming out of agencies, coming out of silos and sharing information so it can become a more cohesive approach. So has there ever been any consideration with actually tracking what CIT is saying the benefits are to see if it's really benefiting the community, especially the mentally ill and their families?
Yeah, one time we used to collect very good data, and I don't know, part of that dropped off when COVID started, because we used to have VIPs, volunteer in policing, would track a lot of that information, and I don't know if that's gotten reestablished. But I can provide you sample reports from prior, so you can see what was tracked.
I'm really not asking for that because I did look at the website quite a bit. There hasn't been updates on information since 2017, 2018. There was information on suicides, and then there was information on, tracking the type of cases. So and I'm not asking for that. What I am just inquiring about is some kind of actual consistent approach that can support what it is that the CIT states that they were doing. So I just have a couple of more questions. Say if there was a crisis, a mental health crisis, and now you have your people up to speed that you hired. I take it's going to be a while before they can be on the streets with the
as quickly as possible. I don't have an exact time frame, but we are working to get that in place as quickly as possible.
Okay, so say if they are, once they're on the street, say they're at a crisis call, so there would be one officer and one co-responder at a call. Can you help me with that?
It depends on the nature of the call. That officer, of course, may ask for assistance if it's a highly dangerous call, something like that, or if they anticipate a problem. But most of the time, it's going to be the co-responder and that BHU officer responding to the call, and then they handle it by themselves if they can.
Okay, so say, since we know that not only in Topeka but across the United States, mental health issues are endemic. I mean, I believe we're going to see more and more rather than fewer and fewer. And say that there is a team that is on a call, and then there is another mental health call. You would have another team when you're fully staffed with your two co-responders. You would be able to get that team out there, correct?
Right, and we have those situations. Currently, we've had them in the past where it's just a busy day. And so you have one team who is dealing with a situation, and their situation comes up, And like on first shift with the layout that we have, the homeless outreach officer would then switch to the BHU role and help take one of those calls. And then if they're both tied up, the sergeant comes in and takes calls. And then, we go from there. But yeah.
Because in Oakland, in certain days, it would not be unusual to have a multiplicity of calls with mental health issues, drug and addiction-related issues. So if that by chance would exhaust the workers, the co-responders that you have, the part of the BHU, TPD that you have, then you start trying to fill in spots. And then a officer from outside of the BHU unit can then come in. Is there any difference in level of training that an officer that works just totally within the BHU unit has that one that just received the 40 hours of training?
So right now, it comes down to the experience that they carry with them and having that co-responder lays on ability, because that's what the BHU team brings, is that ability to do the assessments in the field and that type of thing. Now, a CIT trained officer who responds to that call recognizes the need for this person to get help. They wouldn't be able to do that screening in the field. They would go back to the process which we had before, which is transport them to a facility to be screened by a social worker at that facility and follow that process. Again, I'd like to point out that not every mental health call requires a BHU level response. Some of them are just folks having a bad day and need to talk to somebody. A CIT officer is equipped to handle those types of calls. But if it rises to what we call severe crisis level, then you bring a specialist, which would be the BHU.
And as a CIT officer that works in this BHU unit full-time, that's his or her thing, are they armed? Do they always go out in the field with?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. They're armed?
Yes, they're fully equipped police officers. They do have a soft uniform that they wear oftentimes, which is a polo and khaki pants to soften the look. That's not mandatory. It's sometimes situationally based. But they are fully armed and equipped officers. Again, their role is safety and security for that process to take place, so they need to be equipped for that.
Okay, well, I thank you for that. I did just have one question for Mr. Persinger and then one question for the chief.
Sure.
Greetings, Mr. Mayor, City Council.
Hi, Mr. Persinger. I just had a question. I have heard, and tell me if this is true, that Vallejo currently is 46% understaffed.
Oh, no.
Okay.
At about 305 positions, we have 54. That's about 18%.
So 18% understaffed?
Right.
And what positions are those are you trying to fill?
Well, about half of those are in a crisis area of one kind or another. We've just filled both of the co-responder positions for the first and second shift. And so there are actually 3 people who can go out, other than, many other Vallejo staff on the street every day. And then the weekend, 2 12-hour shifts on the weekend we're currently recruiting for. We've been pretty fortunate to, fill those 2 positions. One, Ashley's already on duty. Rachel's supervisor's there to help out, goes out frequently. And then Anel starts the 29th of August. So they'll be available to assist Major and others in the BHU.
Okay. Well, that's a big difference from 46 to 18%. The other question I had, and this is just what I'm hearing in community, is the possibility of there being a new location, a new Vallejo that will be, I want to say, I don't know how to word this, for those that may have to be forced into involuntary commitment, that Vallejo is going to be building a facility or finding housing for a place for that type of facility. Is that true?
No, not exactly. course, would punt to the city manager anytime. Bill started, much of the effort that we have here and the many blessings we have in Shawnee County in terms of how, mental health and law enforcement, other partners work out on the street every day. But no, I think what you may be referring to is called the Crisis Intervention Act, the CIA. In fact, Chief Scarlett City Manager was instrumental in helping write that, and we made a few edits at Vallejo and some of the other mental health partners around the state. That is currently a bill on the Kansas books that does allow for someone to be committed locally to outpatient or something that looks like inpatient care for up to 72 hours, during which time they have access to counsel. They can, they're just given all the crisis help they can get. It's another attempt to keep people out of the state hospital. I don't know that in Shawnee County we're particularly looking at a whole big unit. In fact, what I've been talking to people about, Jump and others and city officials, and anybody will stand still long enough to listen to me explain the whole thing, is that we think we can take our current 72-hour crisis facility at 400 Southwest Oakley that's voluntary, strictly voluntary, and probably convert 1, 2, 3, 5 beds, whatever we need, staff them up to help someone who's there involuntarily, hopefully just for a few hours so they can get back up on their feet. It's really a miracle how many people can get back together in a few hours, given the right supports and keep out of the state hospital. In fact, we've got some data on hospital diversions, some other kind of responding, some savings with the jail, some other things that we don't have enough data. We would like more, so I support any effort to help us get more data, but we could review that with you sometime at, my time is yours on that. We'd be glad to do that. So what the difference between a crisis intervention center, which is a local facility that keeps people involuntarily, versus a crisis residential center, which is what we have, or a transitional living facility that's licensed as a crisis, is the one's voluntary, the other is not. And so I personally don't see a need after many years of study. In fact, we looked at a number of sites around Topeka 4 or 5 years ago and did quite a site evaluation, but I just don't see a need for 10, 15, 20, 30 bed, forced involuntary care facility in Topeka. We send so few people to the state hospital these days because of diversion efforts, those that are overseen by, Major Clump and others, where we're working way upstream with people. We do have a lot of anecdotes that, we can talk about, or anecdotal stories and evidence and some data. We wish we had more, but we know that we divert a lot of people from the state hospital.
So is some of that because they don't have beds available at the state hospitals?
Part of that has, over the years, there was a moratorium, and it was difficult, and that is why, and still to this day, they don't have enough beds. The KDADS, our state mental health authority, is working very hard to, create new beds. Indeed, they have in the last year or so, and they've reopened the hospital and dropped the moratorium on admissions, the blockage of voluntary admissions, that is. So, we're a little underbedded at Osawatomie and Larned State Hospital for strictly psychiatric inpatient involuntary beds, but not to the point where I think we need a special unit here in Topeka. I felt differently a few years ago, got to looking at the cost and just how a unit like that I think would kind of, if you allow me to speak figuratively, kind of suck all the air out of the room in terms of personnel, cost, energy, or not the same return that I think we can get for converting a few beds at our current facility, staff them up with a physician, a nurse, a couple of folks to, do attendant care, peer support 24 hours a day. I think we can get the same thing done on a much less cost, much more efficiently, and with a lot more dignity and better outcomes for the individual. But that's the direction I'm taking Vallejo. That's not my final call in terms of, who would do that. But we are trying to have input to, policymakers and others, and so sure defer to others.
Well,
okay.
Do you have some?
Yeah, so one of the things that the moratorium did do for local community-based services is actually make us change the way we did business. Right. And what happened is there was never a need locally to have involuntary beds because the state hospital was always fully operational and we could get people down there within a timely manner. That changed under the moratorium. So what we had to do was change our approach in treatment and care. At that time, I was on the Vallejo board. Mm-hmm. And so when we built that crisis center, what the act allowed us to do was actually hold some people involuntarily while we got them immediate services. And as Mr. Persinger pointed out, most people stabilize within a couple hours, but almost everybody kind of gets stabilized after 72 hours. And so if we can keep them in the community and provide community-based services, they are better off as well as their families, and the community is better served.
I might follow up, Councilwoman. When we built the crisis facility right before I got here in 2014, we had one on Saline Street. Before that, it was about a third the size. But the addition of that new facility allowed us to cut state hospital admissions. I have to get my numbers out. I do have those. I haven't looked at them for a while. By more than half, we reduced our lengths of stay and, got people into service a whole lot quicker. We do, every community mental health center in the state of Kansas, there are 26 of us, is obligated currently, even outside of the Crisis Intervention Act, in our normal community mental health center licensure standards, been in place since, probably about 1965 or so. We are obliged to provide what's called a suitable place for individuals who have already been through due process in a court and found that there's probable cause of a mental illness while they are awaiting a trip to Osawatomie. We do house those individuals at the residence. Some stay for a few hours, some stay for a few days. We provide whatever treatment we can. It's all still voluntary at that point, but the person is essentially committed to the state hospital. We're just providing them that safe place to stay for a few days until we can get them in. Our relationships with the state hospital have allowed for some pretty quick admissions, and so we're pretty happy with that. But we are available to do that as well. About 50 people a year stay with us who've already been through due process. We have something like, I think about 1,300 admissions a year to that voluntary facility. I have to look for sure and give you a good number on that. Some of those are repeat numbers. I think the overall is 800 or 900 distinct individuals. But Councilwoman, I'd have to pull out my data and give you.
No, and I'm not asking for that. But what I would like to know is, in the last 5 years, have you seen an increase in Topeka in the amount of mental health crises, needs for bed, needs for beds not being available, more calls that your team is working with PD or whatever partnerships? Are you continuing to see an increase?
No, it's been about steady. It's about steady over the years. What is increasing and what is changing are the acuity, the depth of the stories, the unmet needs of the individuals. And that's, some of the things that we're seeing in more difficult clinical presentations. It's hard to summarize, but it's the best I can kind of subjectively share with you. But the demand for mental illness care is about the same over the year, about 6,500 to 7,000 people or so. Quite a few of those folks come in crisis, probably a third or more. And that's been pretty steady over the years. What has kind of solidified and I think become part of the culture is how we respond to those individuals to meet them before there's ever a crisis. I think it's one of the reasons that maybe the crisis numbers, at least as Vallejo tracks them, maybe hasn't gone up all that much, pretty steady, is that we're getting ahead when a law enforcement officer and a social worker can walk up to the individual on the street and just a very non-threatening way say, how's it going? It's hot, needs water, you doing okay? That maybe we avert a crisis right there, and it's pretty difficult to objectify, but we have a lot of stories like that. But I like to think we're ahead of the problem too, and it's probably keeping our numbers in our
Right.
fairly steady.
Okay, well, thank you.
Appreciate your interest in all this. Let me know how I can continue
Sure.
to help. Thank you.
Sure. And just a couple of questions for the chief. Chief, still being a newbie at this, can you tell me how vacancy credits work? And the information you gave shows that there's about $800,000 in vacancy credits, and then it's anticipated that next year there'll be $1.2 million. Can you explain to me so then the public can understand it a little better?
That's a question I think is probably better suited for finance, but I can certainly give it a try. The operating budget with vacancy credits is obviously the amount of money for those salaries and benefit packages for the open positions. Beyond that, I don't know what
And it just stays there, and it doesn't
I
get
do appreciate
used.
being called a newbie, though.
I'm a newbie.
Oh, you meant you.
No, man. No, I would say it till you went off if I was going to say that to you, but
okay.
no,
I got you.
I'm the newbie.
I have no doubt.
Okay, so basically that fund is there. It's within the police department budget, and it's not used for anything else unless a vacancy is filled.
No, I would not characterize it as that. That has not been my experience.
Okay.
Adam, can
Yeah, so just a quick explanation of vacancy credits. So vacancy credits are more of an accounting maneuver that we're able to do to lower the total cost of our personnel expenses on a given budget year. So this, for 2022, that number is about $800,000 that we lowered that expense from the total general fund budget. So that's in our non-departmental department, so it doesn't hit a particular department. And then as we have personnel savings throughout the year, that's just a total general fund savings that we have. So any savings that we have during the year is in excess of what we budget for our vacancy credits.
So vacancy credits are not held by the department. They don't get to keep those. It goes back into the general fund. And so when they talk about an excess at the end of the year, those are where those dollars are accounted for. But it's not a pot of money that individual departments get to keep.
But it's a real pot of money.
It is real money. It's real dollars. But the budget needs to be built on the anticipation that positions are going to be filled.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, that was the question I had on that. And then, Chief, just the 988 phone number that I guess was turned on to differentiate from the 911 number. I guess there's a 988 emergency or...
The suicide.
Yeah, the suicide, yeah.
Prevention.
Yeah, and Topeka has...
That is different than the 911 system, to answer, yes.
Well, yeah, but 911, they wanted to move all those mental health calls away, or some of those mental health calls away from 911. So the NAMI, I think, headed it, National NAMI, I think, headed it out, where they created the 988 number. Is that not correct?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And there's been a move on lots of different fronts to take call load off of the dispatch center that is not 911 because of their staffing issues.
So we have 988 access here in Topeka.
Yes.
Is that correct? Does that take any of the load off of you all, or if they're routed through that line, and if it's a mental health crisis, you guys in your BHU are still going to respond?
I think that's a triage situation depending upon the situation, but absolutely I would, without having the data points in front of me, I would think that it would take off some of our call load, just because of not having to respond out there and then do the triage with the person ourselves. If it can be done over the phone, that's going to help us out. So.
Yes, ma'am. So the 988 number is a state monitored number. And so when they call that, it'd be just like the Veterans Hotline. If an individual calls that, they will triage that. And if it's an emergency, then they will contact local law enforcement or the local 911 dispatch center, and they will stay on the line and have communication with that person while resources are dispatched.
Got it. Is there, and I don't know if this question is going to be for you or city manager, how is that number being rolled out locally in Topeka? Is there an aggressive, campaign to get that number out, to start differentiating between the 911 and the 988? I was reading different things about what different communities are doing, but if there could be some report I could get on how that's being handled, either it's with you guys or wherever it's from, whoever it's from, but within the city, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I can tell you, to my knowledge, we've not done a rollout specifically the city of Topeka. It's a relatively new program, but that is definitely something we can get with the 988 system and figure out how to roll that out.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Mayor?
Oh, I just want to add a little to that.
You have information?
I know the 988, because that's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. It's tied with the Veterans Crisis Line pretty much very closely. They're kind of from the national level trying to push the 988 out. I know through the VA system, they're trying to get it out to all the vets. It is probably a little slower process, but I believe just with having a number like that, you can remember that easily. It's going to bring so much more than having to remember. Around the VA, I usually carry a couple with me anyways for the Veterans Crisis Line, which is the exact same number. They just divert it wherever. But with having that smaller number to remember, it's going to definitely get more attention and more remembrance for when someone has an issue to have that short of a number to remember compared to the 800 number that it is now, which I have no clue. Like I said, I usually sometimes
carry a few of those cards on me just for other veterans, but I have no idea what that number is, but I remember the 988, so
Yeah,
hopefully that will roll itself out by its, kind of almost like 911 did.
okay. Mayor, I would like to ask, since I put forth these questions, and I stated at the first budget meeting, that I would like to discuss as a body some possible, shifts, but I'm wondering if we can get it on the agenda to have a dialogue about information that I sent to all colleagues on a couple of different programs to perhaps consider either a pilot or shifting over, but I would like to have some dialogue about that, but not tonight. So can it be put on the agenda before the budget is finalized?
I would prefer that you and I, city manager, and we'll identify other partners, have a meeting in my office before we move it to an agenda item. I want to make sure that we have the information we need to bring it to a discussion. So if we can start there and we can make that arrangement for a meeting to bring that under consideration.
Before the budget is passed.
We will try.
Okay, hope everybody heard that. Okay, thank you.
We will try. I'll repeat it.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Ortiz and then Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Manager, when the 988 number came out, I believe I asked you to ask staff to put together some type of flyer, and I believe Gretchen is working on that. I don't know where we're at, if you'll double check to see. I think that's easier than to say, hey, here's the crisis number. So if you can check on that to see where we're at on that. I like to do flyers or something catchy to give to the NIAs and to give to different people as opposed to just saying, here's that number. So if you can check on that, that would be great. Thank you.
Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you to Major Plump for that presentation. Thank you to your team. I'm very encouraged to hear about this program, and I feel like everything has pretty much been covered by Councilwoman Valdez, so I appreciate her thorough nature. I would like to see if there was a way that we could go ahead and have a status presentation in, I don't know, like in 6 months, see how this project, how this part of the department is working, and just making sure that our community members know what's going on within our department.
Okay, did you make that as a request to have a status report? Okay.
Yeah. If somebody has a better idea in 6 months, I just arbitrarily pick that, so.
Is that on the behavior health unit?
Yes, please.
Okay, we can make that happen. And I think it is important that we revisit it. So thank you for the suggestion. I have Councilman Kell, Deputy Mayor Duncan, and then Councilwoman Hiller.
So this is either for the chief or the major. How closely are you working with the VA? I know you work with Vallejo, but how closely are you working with the VA for maybe having those spots filled for situations where maybe veterans? Because one of the branches of the Veterans Crisis Line is actually here in Topeka at the Topeka VA for the national number, but quite honestly, we're a little bit of a different breed of people as veterans. We kind of internalize a lot more. We swallow our words, swallow our emotions until they kind of erupt sometimes. But how closely are you guys working with the VA to deal with veterans in crisis?
Right, so I'll answer that in two different ways. First of all, the BHU officers have received specific training for dealing with veterans in crisis. They have a specialized training available to them, and they've had that training. The second thing I will tell you is that we enjoy a close working relationship with the VA as a community partner. And so they have connections and communications liaisons within the local VA for veterans who are in crisis, and we can work to help those veterans through the VA or through the local resources like Vallejo.
Thank you. And then one last thing I just want to kind of mention to everyone. A couple years ago, HBO did a docuseries on the Veterans Crisis Line and what the process is all about. And so people kind of want to know a little bit more what's going on with the Suicide Prevention Hotline or, the Veterans Crisis Line, those type of things. HBO did an amazing documentary. You can catch it on HBO Max, or they have it broken down, I believe, on YouTube is where I've seen it before, where they have it broken down into several different segments. So you have to watch probably 20, 30 segments to get it all in. But it's a really good way to learn about what goes through the whole process. And as someone mentioned earlier, how they communicate with local law enforcement to kind of keep them aware of the situation and have them ready if needed. So I believe that's a great resource for our community to look at to understand what's going on behind the scenes.
Councilman, the BHU unit and the police department, like the Major said, works very closely with the VA. The VA also has presenters in our basic CIT course, and there are segments that are dedicated to the veterans. And then we created a CIT veterans course. We built that, we developed that, and we've taken that throughout the state of Kansas. And so we are, I think, ahead of the game as far as working with the veterans.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I've got two questions. One's for the chief and one is for Mr. Persinger. So what is the primary reason we do not have a third shift co-responder, basically BHU team? I mean, is it budget? Is it staff? Is it a combination of those things? I mean,
Yeah, I think that's it. It's those things, and it's call load. And like I said, I think the point that needs to be mentioned over and over and over again until we make sure that everybody understands is there are CIT trained police officers who respond to 911 calls for service every day of the week, every week of the year, every shift of the day. So that's the thing. But yeah, those are the challenges for a full-time 24/7.
Right. But I know, I'm sure our officers appreciate having mental health professionals by their side if we can provide them as often as possible.
Absolutely.
For every shift. So
Yeah,
that's why I was
absolutely.
wondering what the big reason that was, there was a hole there.
Right behind getting the police department fully staffed, I would be happy with Vallejo being fully staffed as well.
Right. All right, so my next question, Bill, I'm gonna put you on the hot seat. I apologize. Give you no heads up on this one.
Glad to serve.
I do support, as I just mentioned, finding ways to put some more mental health professionals on the street along with our officers, and there may be some opportunities. While I would love to think that our department's going to fill all those vacancies over the next 2 to 3 years that we have, it's unlikely, and there may be some opportunities if we get creative with some of those vacancy credits. But here's the hot seat question. Some of the feedback we have heard from the community is that in some of these situations, we should not have officers responding at all, that it should be a 100% mental health unit team exclusively without an officer on hand. And I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on that type of model that doesn't include some kind of officer support.
Of course, the short answer is we don't support models for co-responding or CIT that would send out a social worker only. I mean, if we're going to have a co-responder program, the idea is a co-response. We're generally not in favor of dispatching a social worker to a situation that, by him or herself at any hour of the day that could be potentially dangerous. And we just don't know. The situation changes every few minutes. Our staff are trained, but our police are much more well-trained to assess and reevaluate and retool moment by moment. So we definitely support the model that we've created here in Shawnee County. I take no credit for it. I inherited it when I got here in 2015. I was proud to be a part of it. And there are some, programs nationally that do dispatch mental health folks by themselves. And of course, you have to understand rescue mission, Vallejo and Of course, our law enforcement partners at the city and county have people on the street all the time. We have social workers, case managers, case workers, peer support workers, attendant care, crisis case managers, go to people's houses, visit with them. Many of them, most of them we know. We try to operate in multiple environments so that we're kind of, people are kind of tripping over us. It's kind of our strategy. And so, we are trying to be everywhere that the people are. But to go out on these kind of calls without a trained law enforcement officer is, I don't think, a responsible model that we want to engage here. Having said that, we're partners with the city. We've, in fact, designed most of our strategic plan at Vallejo around the city, county, and the state, and to some degree the federal government, their needs, issues, challenges, and tried to align ourselves with, the fact that your problems are ours and your successes are ours and vice versa. So, we'd sure be a part of a discussion if there's a better model to look at. We wouldn't support that. I've talked to my staff, my board about that, talked to our city leaders about that, and tried to listen to their input as well. I just don't think it's safe. But no, I appreciate the question, and I see where people are coming from. I think the program that we have is community policing and community mental health at their best. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention Stormont Vale's Behavioral Health Unit at 6th and Gage. They do a tremendous job. It allows us to divert some people from the state hospital. Great partners. Also want to mention the City ID program, very unique. People look at that thing that Sergeant Clam created and that Chief has and Major Clump have continued, and in awe. We know people have obtained housing where all they had before was a tent on the river. We know they've obtained jobs, a trip back home, benefits that they can get, job training, job coaching, healthcare benefits. It's wow. It's a great program, and I know that Sergeant Rose has picked up with that duty and carries on with a lot of that every day. In fact, all hours of the day. So we've got a great set of services here. We'd be glad to come back anytime with our partners and talk more about these things. It's a blessing to be here in Shawnee County to see the things we're getting done. And I know we have challenges and some things we'd like to do more of, but it's quite a good environment for people who are at risk. And the stories we could tell, some of you may be aware of, would move you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two questions, and Bill, you might be able to answer both, but maybe the first one to Major and then the second one to you. We've gotten correspondence, people have visited with us and written and so on, and there's concern expressed. I hope they're all watching tonight because it's been very informative about, like taking away officers as if we're doing too much mental health on the officer side. And it doesn't appear that way at all because it's so critical to all the things that you do. But in the behavioral health unit itself, I'm not looking at the overheads that you had. Mm-hmm. Did you say that there are more mental health professionals than officers in that core unit, or 50-50?
There's 3 full-time officers assigned to it, sergeant. And then there's 2 full-time co-responders and up to 2 weekend part-time responders. So when you're looking at the full-time aspect, there's more officers than co-responders. But again, one's a sergeant who oversees the unit, and one is focuses on the homeless outreach, which, by the way, is becoming more and more of a thing we do. It's very much a daily activity at this point.
And much appreciated. Well, I will still say that looks like it's about even out then. If you've got 2 full-time and then 2 weekend people when it's fully funded on the mental health side, and then the 2 FTEs.
Right. When you lay it out as an application of personnel, it's fairly even between us and Vallejo.
And my second question would be more for Bill Persinger. I think one of the other pieces of feedback we get is we need more mental health. There's Vallejo only has so much, and some of our people can't pay, and so on. And I know the times have been really tight for you, but you advised me and so people are talking about money, and we're in budget right now, as you know, and always talk about money. You shared with me a tremendous advance that has developed Vallejo. And I wish you would share that with everyone.
Oh, you're talking about the certified community behavioral health clinic?
Yes.
Transformation happening all over the country.
Yes.
Yeah, I could probably do that in about 2 hours. And seriously, Councilwoman, my time is yours, and my time is all of yours, so we're so glad to serve alongside you folks. But yeah, it probably in about 9 months or a year, Vallejo and Family Services Guidance Center will become, well, I'll not say will, but the plan, the basic schedule, based on a few factors, we are preparing to become certified community behavioral health clinics. Now, that's a community mental health center. A lot of folks will look at Vallejo in a year or 2 or 3, and we will improve some things, access and a few new services and some things like that. But it'll be kind of community mental health center on steroids, if you will, if I could again speak figuratively. It'll allow us to Medicaid, our single largest payer, will pay at cost at some point in the future. We're hoping 9 months, maybe a year, could be a little longer depending on the state's timeline, some budgeting factors, but we are in preparation stages right now, working actively with KDADS, our mental health authority, in pursuit of that status. And so it means that mental health centers all across the country are being federally recognized by the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services and being paid at cost based on an audited and negotiated cost report, like a hospital or an FQHC or rural health center, places like that. So it should mean more better rates from Medicaid, and then if our other grant funding will remain steady, the sun ought to shine a little brighter in about a year, Councilwoman. We're hoping.
I don't want to overstate it, but I was
No,
thinking
I don't either, but,
you
we're
were
getting
hoping
ready.
that together that you're being paid per council at this point at less than it costs you to provide.
Fee for service, yeah. By
And
and
so
large,
this
yes.
will be at cost, and that it could mean as much as $1 million a year difference.
I
in
hope so.
funding in this
Who knows?
community.
$500,000, $1 million, maybe more in dollars
Okay.
that we could put to good use if the rest of our grant funds will hold steady. So we're
I
hoping.
didn't want to drag it out too much,
No,
but
no,
that's
no.
a lot of money.
No,
I think it
and-
means a lot to everybody to know that you've taken those steps
Well,
and
thank
that
you.
that's happening for
Thank you.
us.
We've got good support for that. And on the co-responder program, simply a matter of not being able to hire folks. So we'd love to fill those 2 12-hour shifts. The city has stepped up and funded this program. The county chips in some. The state at one point funded 1 or 2 positions, but that grant funding stream just ran out. I mean, some of those funds just got depleted. And so the city stepped right up and under former and current leadership have maintained that, and you wouldn't have a program without it, such as our detox and others. We just really rely on the city for a lot of critical things, and we hope we're good partners to you.
So we're already paying for that part of the program, and what I just asked you about is what you're able to offer as the safety net for the whole picture.
Right, things, yeah, sure, yes. Mhm. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Kemp? Major, I was going to ask one more question. The deputy mayor kind of made me think about this on mental health crises. Let's say Station 10 over on 37th Street, something happens right across the street where it's a mental health crisis, fire department can be right there. Are they allowed to enter before the police, or is it a policy? Because I know certain cities have this policy. Police have to enter first before medical or fire could enter. What's the policy on the?
Well, I can't speak to the fire department or the medical policies themselves. They each have their individual policies to follow. But as a rule of thumb, generally the police, if it's an active, violent situation, the police will be called to stabilize that situation, and then fire and medical will come in.
Okay.
However, situationally, it would be up to them to decide, based upon their own policies and protocols, what they're going to do with that situation.
And then how many times do we have to forcibly enter into a residence roughly in a year because of mental health crises?
I would be completely guessing if I gave you any number. I can tell you it's not uncommon, but it's not like an everyday thing either.
Okay. I was just thinking.
Yeah, it happens, but it's not real common.
We have the smoke alarm giveaway here in town. I just know if with people with chronic situations, if we did a lockbox situation, because I know sometimes, I think I might have watched, when I was watching that Veterans Crisis movie, people put lock boxes outside their door of their home with a key, so when they do have a mental health crisis, whoever can enter without busting the door down, and sometimes making the situation worse by busting the door down, rather than, slowly opening the door having the key, be able to slowly open the door and talk to the person that way, you know.
Right. So if we have a situation that requires quote unquote forced entry, we look at the minimal options first, if there are any, and then, you know, we'll force the door or whatever we need to do to get into that place, depending on the situation. So if there's options, if we have if it's an apartment complex and we have a manager with a key that's right there and can unlock it for us, great. If not, then we have to find other ways to help get in there and rescue the person inside.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Major,
Yes, sir.
while you're there, these are all good questions. I think it's important that everybody's had an opportunity to visit with you. For me, I keep listening and I keep hearing capacity in different forms. And to that question, I think I have an idea on the answer. You know, we're capital city. The Topeka Police Department is not the only law enforcement agency that operates within the city limits.
Yes.
We have the Shawnee County Sheriff, we have Capitol Police, KHP comes through here, they make car stops, I've seen them. There are other law enforcement agencies that can come into contact in situations that we're talking about tonight that require some kind of mental health services. How, and this is probably something that hasn't been tracked, but how often do you might think that those other agencies call upon the resources of the Topeka Police Department, which then, again, reduces the availability for our agency to continue to keep its capacity to a level that if 2 or 3 situations are going on, that we're able to respond in sufficient manpower?
Right. So again, I wouldn't have the numbers for you exactly. I'd hate to speculate, but in the same way as the last question, it happens. They're certainly aware of our BHU program and our CIT trained officers. We do get requests. It's not uncommon for us to get requests from the county to assist. As a matter of fact, we had one the other day that was a suicide attempt, and the Shawnee County had requested us to come out and help with that situation. Highway Patrol, Capitol Police. Like I said, we have so many law enforcement agencies, 501 Police Department, so many different agencies in the city, and not all of them are blessed to have the program that we have. They are aware of our program, and they can make that request to the agency, and certainly if we can assist, we'll assist.
That's good, and I appreciate that. Along the lines of the training piece,
yes, sir.
I believe the Topeka Police Department does an excellent job of training its staff and making available that training to those who are interested. Is there and could there be a more active outreach to those other agencies to let them know when that training is going on at the academy, so that if they want to send some of their staff there as well, I'm thinking that if they take advantage of it, if just it's 1 or 2 or 3, no matter what the number, that just adds to the available number of law enforcement people who may have that training, and increases our capacity for the city and the county for that matter.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but I would say, in my position, I'm not privy to the administrative process over training. I would like to think that communication is happening out to the local agencies and such when we provide those trainings, and we would certainly entertain the option for them to join in on that training as well. To the other point of creating a training that would be available to them, I don't think that's out of reach, but again, it's kind of outside of my scope.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate, before I wrap up, are there any other questions from the body? Councilman Lesser.
Mine is more for Bill, actually.
Three podiums up there.
Councilman?
Just good to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
You know, just a couple things that I'll kind of respond to. one of the things where we've talked about, in regards to, for instance, one of your staff going out by yourself without accompanying a law enforcement officer. One thing also to take in mind, unfortunately, is the liability that your company would carry by doing so. And I know this from writing many organizations such as yours that you probably would not be able to have insurance, because that is the part of a lot of the insurance carriers is if you're going to be going into violent situations. I see it on the applications every day. Are you going to be accompanied by a law enforcement officer or blah, 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 blah. So that makes that very difficult. Not impossible, but
kind of an underwriter's nightmare to get a hold of one of those things.
It gets very much more expensive, obviously. So that, and then that still doesn't relieve the liability of sending, one of your staff in this situation where if they were to get hurt, aren't protected by the Kansas Tort Claims Act and all those good things. And then the other piece that as I've listened to lots of the questions and lots of the dialogue, I kind of see this as two different pieces. I see it as one piece being the response that we have to these different situations, which none are good and some end tragically. And then the other piece of it is what we do prior to eliminate the number of those, or at least reduce the number of those type of occurrences or episodes. Because you and I have talked about this in the past. And people ask, for instance, you and I have talked about my daughter's suicide. My daughter was treated at Stormont Bell West, at Vallejo, I can give you about 15 different places, unfortunately. And people ask me, hey, were you talking about it and all those type of things? Well, I don't mind talking about it because I don't want people to forget her, so that doesn't make it hard to do that. You still miss them. But the point being that I wanted to make it about that was some people die of mental illness. Some people, there's nothing that we can do, whether we have the right people there, we don't have the right people. When she was on that bridge for the third time, she was going off that bridge. And there were people that were there that tried. And there are those people that we still have to contact, some of them law enforcement that my wife still has contact with that were there when it happened. And they still have to deal with it. And they had to get counseling from doing that. So the point to me is, as I've made very vocal with the ARPA funds that we're having, is a large majority of that going to help with the mental illness crisis that we have, because we learned very quickly that there just weren't many resources, not near as many as we need, and we got a good facility being built for youth over by family service and guidance, and then the job that you do. But we're picking up the pieces when we respond to these events, and some people have made that decision that we just can't stop it. And unfortunately, that was Lauren's decision, and from everything I've heard, and one of the recent incidents, we as a city, as a community, failed that man. You know what I mean? But then there again, like you and I've talked, some people die of mental. They do. It's what happens. And so I think it's important that we make sure we have these resources. We have all these things, but the most important thing is that we have the resources to try to stop it prior to it getting to that point. And that's where my focus is, because we can second guess everybody all day long if they're going to the situation that they're in when they're trying to talk somebody off the roof or off, a violent act like we had at the railroad station. But thank you for what you do. You always have my support. You know that.
Thank you, sir.
And there again, I've said it before, and I've told the people, families, my intention is as much of our funds as we can afford to use out of that bucket we have goes to help those people in need, whether it's veterans, youth, children, et cetera, who are fighting these. And I think your numbers are correct. And I think Councilwoman Valdivia, though, probably is right that we're probably not seeing what COVID has done mentally, from a mental health standpoint, to a lot of our youth, that we probably are going to see in the next, 5 years. Because having a child that was a junior when it hit, and then seeing some of the struggles that a lot of his classmates are having with adjustment to college and all those type of things. While the numbers may not be there, I think they will be in 5 years when we start looking at it. Thank you for all you do.
I started my career in 1974, really, as an undergrad, and I've given, a lot of words about mental health, and yours are way more powerful in the last 5 minutes than mine ever were in a whole career. Mike, thank you for sharing.
So, to wrap up, if there are no further questions, I really want to thank Major Dr. Klump, Chief Wheelis, Mr. Pershinger, for your presentation. I think you've been very responsive to the questions that have been asked. I don't think that there has been any doubt that you're doing as much as you can to help improve the services for mental health here in Topeka. So I thank you very much. I appreciate the questions being asked by the council as well. And we'll move on now to the next item on the consent agenda.
So for the consent agenda, there are no items this evening. The minutes were removed and placed on the September 6th agenda, and there are no applications. So we'll just move on to action items. A is a resolution introduced by interim city manager William E. Cochran in accordance with section 1860-010 of the Topeka Municipal Code, approving a conditional use permit to allow operation of a home care type 2 facility, providing nursing and daily care as needed for up to 12 full-time residents on property currently zoned R1 Single Family Dwelling District and located at 1920 Southwest 32nd Street in the city of Topeka, Shawnee County, Kansas.
Mr. City Manager.
Mayor, governing body, this is a topic that was moved out by the Planning Commission and moved to the whole body as a recommendation to raise the number of full-time residents at this property. The governing body has 4 options. They can approve the Planning Commission's recommendation, they can amend the Planning Commission's recommendations, they can reject it, or they can remit it back to the Planning Commission for additional consideration. With that, we do have Mr. Fyander present to answer any questions if there's any additional questions on this action item, and there are people, I believe, signed up to speak publicly.
Okay. Before we get into that, this is a point where I do have to ask for ex parte communications. So if I may read, prior to proceeding to the vote, each member of the governing body who is engaged in ex parte communication with any individual, either in favor of or against the matter being considered, must state that the communication occurred and indicate that even in light of having engaged in the communication, they were able to fairly, objectively, and impartially consider the measure based only upon the evidence provided on the record. The record includes the Planning Commission minutes, the staff report, and its attachments, the public comments made during the Planning Commission hearing, and similar relevant information related to the matter. So this is my ask of the governing body. Is anyone like to reveal ex parte communication? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did receive an email in regards to this, and I can make a fair decision.
Thank you. Further communications, Councilwoman Hiller.
I think we've all gotten at least a couple emails, even from the clerk's office today, so I haven't seen anything in them that was not in the record. Either way, I think I'd be fine. I also ran into 2 of the people when their issue was canceled, but again, last week they were in the lobby, but.
Others? Councilman Lesser.
I've had communications, I've driven by the site, and then I've looked for information
just in general research, but I can make a impartial decision.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. The same as the others, I also received emails. Nonetheless, I can still render an impartial decision based on the evidence here.
Thank you. Councilman Kell.
Just like the others, I've received emails. It is actually in my district. I've been by it several times and actually inquired when I was actually running for office a little bit more about it. But beyond that, I believe I can make a fair, impartial decision on it.
Thank you. Further communications? Hearing none or seeing none. We have the resolution here. It's been read. Do we have any questions for either the city manager or Mr. Feilander before we proceed? Councilwoman Hiller.
I do, thank you. From what I read, it sounds like there's pretty unanimous feeling that the owners themselves are great and that they're doing a good job with the clients. Some of the neighbors brought up smoking and parking issues. There was some comments that those issues, that there would really only be one car on the street, and that maybe the smoking issues had been taken care of. It does make it seem more industrial in both of those cases, a little more than just a residential if you've got a lot of cars on the street at all times and people hanging out outside. So I just wanted to check particularly whether the commission was satisfied with the voluntary claim that the personnel things on phones and smoking was going to be either has already reduced or was going to be. There was a question about the technical proper name being used and whether there are legal questions with that I'd just like staff to respond to. And then I did want to double check that one of the commissioners had asked about the remodel itself and whether it would meet standards. And because it is, I know people have turned garages into housing before, but there are certain local codes for exits and ventilation and so on. And I just wanted to double check with staff on those three things.
Mr. Feilander.
Councilwoman Hiller, we'll take the last one first and walk backwards.
Okay.
Okay. Local codes, you would be referring to a residential code for building and obviously and fire access and whatnot. So yes, converting a garage would have to be to code for our building codes, and then and that's completely normal and can be done. The licensing of the facility is by the state, and so they have to be satisfied as well that there's a certain amount of square footage per resident. So there's two things to satisfy there in terms of code. One with us, one with the licensing.
There wasn't any mention made in what I read of the documents about local code. I just wanted to make sure,
Gotcha.
especially since this was a little controversial, that
Yep.
that had been considered.
Yes, it's not explicitly stated it has to meet building code, but that is, in fact, what has to happen.
Okay.
And then in terms of, let's see, the ownership, I believe. So our application with the ownership or with the CUP allows either the owner or an agent of the owners to be the applicant. And it came out at the Planning Commission meeting, I believe, that the folks who signed off on the application are, in fact, the owners.
I thought so. I
Yeah,
just
okay.
wanted
All right.
to double check.
And then
those, just having the employees outside and the intrusion beyond just a housing, normal residential housing feel to the way the property was getting used with the extra parking and with the smoking and cell phones outside. Of course, teenagers can do that too, so can grown-ups. But apparently only is going to be capacity for 4 cars in the driveway and 1 on the street by the permit. There seemed to be evidence that had been presented to the commission that there were often as many as 8. So just wanted you to feedback a little more.
So the commission heard that evidence and adopted or recommended one of the conditions be that to add an extra space, so off the street from 4 to 5 spaces. There is no regulation for how many cars are on the street. That's not really germane. It would be the off-street parking that is conditioned here. And I believe it was presented that at times there are up to 8 cars, and that's mainly that's visitors, and that's what came out in the hearing. There are anywhere up to 4 employees. That's another condition. The employees would need to use the off-street parking. So the visitor parking would be on the street.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The other operational type things that came up, again, whether it was the noise of the door or you mentioned folks being outside, I believe they made a commitment at the meeting to address those issues. The Planning Commission did not address operational type things. It's not so much you don't take into consideration the who. It's a land use issue, and any impacts that come from that land use. They're operating a legal land use right now with 8 or up to 8 folks. So it would be, is expanding that to 12 going to cause any more impact than beyond what's there? So the owners had committed at the hearing to address those.
I thought so.
I'll call them,
been done.
more operational.
So back to the vehicles, was it that the commission was satisfied that it would be very infrequent that there would be more than 1, or was it more based on the fact that there's just no regulating how many cars can park on the street?
Yeah, that's just not a zoning issue for how many cars park on the street. That's actually, it's the off-street parking. And so in order to have the capacity for the employees, which the expansion could cause additional employees, then that's why the additional space was required.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Kell?
To kind of answer more of the parking, from what I saw visually going through the neighborhood and stuff, as much as I did, it's more visitors that park on the street, which does kind of clog the street a little bit, but overall, it took me 2 or 3 times going past it when I was first running to even find out it was a residential facility. I just thought it was a house that was having a party and had a lot of people there, and then all of a sudden I found out it was a residential facility. So to me, it's been a quiet place. The times I've been by it, like I said, it's usually weekends when you have the visitors, the family members coming in and stuff like that. But we have several businesses that are run out of people's homes that they have all their work vehicles parked right outside their home on a busy street. One house I can think of has like 3 or 4 work vehicles in the driveway and like another 3 on the street. So that's where they run their business out of. So it's no different to me than running any other business or anything like that. It's just that they don't have the parking, and overall it's a quiet place. So I don't think the parking or anything that should be that big of an issue, since I think every house in that area has a driveway and most of them have garages.
Okay. We've heard the options available to us. The governing body has a chance to either approve the Planning Commission's recommendations to grant the CUP requires 8 votes, amend the Planning Commission's, and that requires 8 votes, reject the Planning Commission's recommendation, and that requires 7 votes. Or remand to the planning commission requires 6 votes. So the chair will entertain a motion so that we can continue discussion if necessary. Motion to approve by Councilman Lesser, seconded by Councilman Kell. Any further discussion on the motion to approve? Okay. Brenda, if you'll read the roll.
Okay, council members Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
and Kell.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Motion is carried. We'll move to action item 5B, if the clerk would read.
B is approval of a joint memorandum of agreement concerning group healthcare cost sharing with the labor unions for 2023 to 2025.
Mr. City Manager.
Mayor, governing body, this is, actually we covered basically B and C, but we are in B. Group health insurance has been, is a negotiated item between the contract, between the unions and the city. With that, I do have Mary Kuckelman available to provide any information if you need any additional information, but this does require 6 votes to pass the healthcare plan.
Okay. The chair will entertain a motion on 5B.
Move approval.
Second. A motion to approve by Councilman Dobler. To hear a second from Deputy Mayor?
Yep.
Second from Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion? Hearing none, if you'll read the roll, please.
Council members Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
and Nager.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Motion being carried, we'll move to action item 5C, a related amendment. City Manager.
Mayor, governing body, this is concerning the healthcare cost sharing with the labor unions. Again, this requires 6 votes of the governing body to approve this healthcare plan.
You've heard the item on the agenda. Is there a motion to approve? Move to approve by Councilman Dobler.
Second.
Second from Deputy Mayor. You're on this job, yeah. If you'll call the roll, please.
Council members Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
and Dobler.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Motion being carried, we'll move to action item. Yes, sir.
It is 8 o'clock right now, and Councilman Emerson had just texted me that he thought it was time for a bathroom break.
I was going to try to get to this 5D and then take that break so we can move.
Tony, that all right with you?
Depends. We'll move on to action 5D.
D is establishing a public hearing date of September 6, 2022 for the purpose of hearing and answering objections of taxpayers relating to the proposed City of Topeka 2023 operating budget, setting the maximum expenditure limits, and authorize the publication of the public hearing notice.
Mr. City Manager?
Mayor, governing body, this is to set the date of September 6, 2022 for the operating budget public hearing. Again, this takes 6 governing body members to approve this budget open hearing date.
Okay.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve by Councilwoman Ortiz, a second by Councilman Kell. If you'll call the roll, please.
Council members Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
and Duncan.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Motion to approve, and before moving on to non-action items, the council will take a 10-minute break and return at 8:15.
Way to do it.
I'll tell you, when I see Dusty say that about Sylvia.
Taylor, are we on?
We're live.
Okay, we're back from our recess. We'll take up now on the agenda, item number 6, if the clerk would read.
A is discussion relating to the request for the Shawnee County Board of Commissioners to annex land not adjoining the city located on the east side of Southeast Croker Road, south of Southeast 37th Street.
Mr. City Manager.
Mayor, governing body, so this topic is a discussion on annexation possibility for the area there at 39th and Croco. The landowner would like to be considered for annexation, so this is a discussion of whether we will refer this, next week, or the 3rd, I think it is when we have our next meeting. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Fyender from our planning commission.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Tonight, I'll just give you a brief overview of where we're at with this and turn it over to Leo to talk about the next steps. This is a unique annexation procedure that I don't think we've been through in a while, since it's an island, considered an island annexation. And we also have the representatives of the development team here tonight for Alcove Development that could also follow up with after we're done and entertain any questions. But so the main point here is this is about an 80-acre tract contiguous actually to the Rockfire development on the southeast side of town, which even though it's contiguous, it is considered still an island, not a non-contiguous annexation. And that requires special steps to get county approval to do that. You just can't do that on your own as we normally do. The analysis here went through the Planning Commission for recommendation. A couple things. One that we look at, first of all, it is in our urban growth area and considered part of our future boundary. So that checks that box. This is considered a tier 3 within our urban growth area, meaning there's one or more of our services that may or may not be ready. We have normally 5 services that we look at: fire, police, streets, water and sewer, and we do an analysis. The departments do their own analysis and tell us, can they provide those services? All of those came back in the affirmative. The one caveat at this point is that the area, this land is not within our service area for water right now. And so to do that, to bring that into our water service area, first you would have to annex the land and then negotiate a transfer of the service rights basically with the rural water district. So we've gone ahead and done some preliminary work to understand what that number on our side looks like, evaluation of that transfer, and right now it's about $54,000. That should be in the analysis part of the packet. So that's the only other, that's the one nuance here that you wouldn't normally see. But we do have our infrastructure adjacent, ready to serve, and so we think this is ready for growth. With that in mind, and the other thing was the cost benefit. So there's definitely the cost in serving the area versus the benefit that you get back in tax revenue and fees with utilities. And that's in the analysis part of your packet, and it definitely shows a positive return. So unless there are any questions about that part of the analysis, I think we would just have Deputy City Attorney Mary Feeney just touch on a couple of the steps that would come after tonight that you would have to go through to make this annexation a reality.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, the next step would be asking the county to make a determination that the annexation will not hinder or prevent the proper growth and development of the area. The last time we did this, as I recall, and I think Councilwoman Hiller and Ortiz were present, was when we did the Akansa Commerce Park in 2011. I think that's the last time we did something like that. And at the September 6th meeting, there will be an action item for a resolution requesting that the county commissioners make this determination. They will then have 30 days to do so. They know this is coming, and so they've kind of set aside some time to consider this. And that'll be the next step. And if they make their findings, then we will be able to proceed with annexation.
Questions for Mary or for Bill? Councilman Dover.
Thank you, Mayor. Bill, utilities have been extended in this area in anticipation of urban growth. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, by the city.
By the city, yes. Back when Rockfire was developed, that there was an interceptor and associated water infrastructure as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
Additional questions? Councilwoman Hiller.
For Bill or Mary, maybe, help me again as to why, if this is adjacent to Rockfire, why is it considered an island, even though the county line is there?
Sure. So Rockfire is an island. It is non-contiguous with the city.
Oh, Rockfire is.
Rockfire is, and so when you attach yourself to an island, you are an island.
Thank you.
No person is an island, though. So, but Rockfire is.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further questions? Okay. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
Sure. And I just wanted to I buried the headline a little bit in that the product and the development that's being proposed here is upwards of 266 units, single and two-family housing. And with that in mind, representatives of Alcova are here if you want to entertain their presentation.
Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on next with no questions unless he has a few 1 week presentation.
You should be signed up.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor, governing body, thank you very much. My name is Jeremiah Johnson. I'm a partner at Alcova Development. This is our second venture into Topeka. Our first one went very well. We were excited about this one. We've been working with Schmidt, Beck, and Boyd, our engineers, to develop a concept for this. It's 188 single-family and 78 townhome units. We would phase it, but we think this would be a good addition for Topeka to help grow its city and provide needed housing. So I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Councilman Dover.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We appreciate your company looking at this development. We've talked a lot about growth and the need for housing. It's, southeast part of Topeka is a great place to be. So we appreciate you being here. And with that, that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, can you give us an idea of the price range for the homes and stuff, so people are getting excited about this opportunity? They can look forward to hopefully buying them as quickly as they're built.
It's hard to say in this market. We're thinking middle-class housing, so ideally 300 to 3 1/4, somewhere in there.
Well, it certainly is a welcome to the growth of the city, and I appreciate you giving us this opportunity as well. Any further questions for Mr. Johnson? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to non-action item 6B.
B is discussion regarding employee residency requirements.
Mr. City Manager.
Mayor, governing body, this was brought forward from the Policy and Finance Committee. At this point, I will turn it over to the deputy mayor who would like to speak to the topic.
Thanks, City Manager. So last February of 21, Policy and Finance Committee started having some conversations with staff and others about jobs in the city in general. We looked at a variety of issues. They ranged from compensation. We knew at that time we were doing the wage study, which we talked about last week, and that we've budgeted for this year. We talked about how we recruit and our partnerships with the partnership and other entities in Topeka, and how we sell Topeka to potential people that we'd like to work here. We talked about benefits and bonuses and packages and what other communities were and weren't doing to recruit people. And so we sort of took a broad look at how do we hire more people and get them to stay and work for the city. One of the things that came out of that was very clear was that we are an outlier now in the state of Kansas as it relates to our current residency requirement, which is that if you work for the city, you must live within Shawnee County. That we saw on multiple survey job applications. I think it was around 30% of the people, when they got to that requirement at the end, just stopped filling out the application. 30% is a pretty high number, and they indicated that. We've lost employees, partly because they had to make the move because their spouse's job didn't necessarily require that they live there, but it made more sense for them. We haven't been able to recruit employees because we have real-world examples of, I'd love to come and work in Topeka, but I'm not taking my kid out of high school. It's not happening right now, and I want them to go through that process, as some of the examples we heard. And this was across all levels of our jobs. It wasn't just police and fire, but it was from planning departments to water departments to every level. So, also as reference, there are 11 cities in the state of Kansas that have populations of 40,000 or more. Not very many. We're one of those. 2 of us have continued to have residency requirements. That's us, the city of Topeka, and Wyandotte Unified Government KCK, which I don't consider comparable because they have a much bigger area where you can live in. All the other 9 cities have eliminated their residency requirements. Lawrence, Salina, Wichita, Manhattan. In terms of counties, there are 10 counties in the state of Kansas that have populations of 50,000 people or more. Shawnee County does not have a residency requirement. They eliminated it. The only county of those 10 that does is, again, Wyandotte County. They've kept that consistent as part of their unified government. So we talk a lot about competing with the private sector, which is a constant battle in terms of wages and benefits and how we recruit. But we are also competing with all of our peer cities in the state of Kansas. And they have all recognized that changes need to be made in this residency requirement. They have done it, and I have talked to someone from every one of those cities to see how it's gone. The most recent change was Salina. They just made the change, and they have all said that it has benefited them positively. So that is where this comes from. Having looked at this for a while and recognizing that times change, life changes, it's not the same world we were in even pre-COVID, and if we want to try to recruit, this may be a change we need to make. This does not open up for every employee. Our city manager, whether that's a deputy or whoever the assistants would be, all of our department heads, our chief of police, chief of fire, would all still have to live within the county. But it would open it up to all other employees across the board. The other exception would be some departments have what, for lack of a better term, I call emergency divisions, and they would be able to each year designate that those employees would also have to live within the radius of, if you got to get here, if your job requires you to be there in 10 minutes to the police station, the fire station, or the water department, then you're going to have to meet the requirement as dictated by that department head. We've also talked about, it's not in the ordinance, but setting forth policies that regulate use of vehicles. If you take a vehicle home, you probably don't get to take it home if you choose to live outside the city limits. That's not a perk that you will get to have. So we have talked about those things. We have tried to model this after what those other cities and counties have done as they've changed it. But that's just a little history of why this is in front of you today as we have looked at all of the various things to try to help our employees, recruit employees, and retain employees. And this one has floated up there with several other issues that we've addressed or are addressing in other areas. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to whoever, whether it's the mayor or the city manager.
City manager, you have any comment on this resolution or this?
I believe the deputy mayor basically summed it up very well as to why this topic is up for consideration once again. Again, this is discussion tonight, so.
What, did you have something? Okay. Councilman Kell?
Was there any discussion on that, on the people that have residency requirement to actually making that more of a bubble than a countywide? Because you get someone that lives on the northwest corner of Rossville area, and they're further away than someone that lives in Jefferson County that's right over the river of Tecumseh area right there that can be here quicker than the person that lives in Rossville. So on that aspect, was that looked at as making more of a bubble? Like, let's say whatever the furthest is from like Topeka to that corner, like I said, of the county, and just kind of making a radius of that. And
I mean, at one point we talked about whether we should just make it, say, the 5-county area or the 6-county area. But the truth is that gets even more complicated because now we're going from verifying a certain number, maybe 24 employees and department heads where they live, to perhaps hundreds of individuals as to verifying on a regular basis. I mean, we did keep it to Kansas. We want you to stay in the state of Kansas. That's in here. And there's been just some discussion whether that should be changed, but we did keep it to Kansas. But the truth is, if your job doesn't require it, if you're not on emergency, then it's not really, we felt, our need to tell you whether you should live 30 minutes away or 55.
oh, that's what I'm talking about. The people that are required to live in the county, give a little bit more bubbles, so now we have a little bit more to work with.
Well, this would just eliminate that requirement.
I'm saying I'm talking about for like the department heads, the city manager, things like that.
No, we want them to stay in the county. We think it's important that if you're going to run the department and be a figurehead for the city, then you should be.
Okay, my thing is, if you look at the county map, we're almost on the Jefferson County line almost, compared to over on the far side of the Wapelonsa County line. You know, that's a large area, and even qualified candidates that may be applying from within. You know, someone may want to come from Jefferson County to apply for a department head job here. And, you know, I like people that know the area and kind of stuff, and that's one of my hesitation of getting rid of the requirement is get someone from Atchison that wants to drive down here. Atchison and Topeka are two totally different types of environments. And so when you get people that don't live in those areas, they don't know what's going on. It's harder for them to kind of work with things. But I was just looking at the county map, and I just think if we're going to eliminate the requirement, we should more make the people that are required to live in a bubble, which we have Arcview here with the city. That's easy to plot in a bubble where someone, you know, tell them, hey, this is where you can live, you know, and rather than within Shawnee County, because I think it opens up a lot more when you take those required people, because the east side versus the west side of the county.
Okay, observation noted. Councilman Dover.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I really struggled with this, and surprisingly, I've heard from a number of people that have a difficult time with the fact that, you know, we're contemplating paying with tax dollars employees that may live in Kansas City or Lawrence or places we compete with, and I understand that. Having said that, I also know that right now, if we hire somebody and require them to live in Shawnee County, they have a tough time finding a place to live, whether it's renting or buying a house. We don't have the housing stock to make that a reality for a lot of folks. So I guess I am, at some point when this comes to us as an action item in a few weeks, I'm going to make a motion that we look at doing this with some sort of time limit on it. You know, who knows what it's going to be like in 5 years. maybe it makes more sense in 5 years to reinstitute some sort of residency requirement. Maybe not. Like a lot of things we do, sometimes we try things, see if they work, see what the results are. So I'm going to introduce the idea. As Councilman Duncan says, nobody else may like it, but I'm going to introduce it. And I like the idea of, obviously, city manager stays in the city limits, department heads within the county, and then maybe a 5-year moratorium on residency requirements for everybody else. And I think if we do that, that would actually grandfather those folks. You know, if we came back later and reinstituted some sort of residency requirement, those folks would be grandfathered, so they would be, as long as they work for the city of Topeka, they would not have to abide by that. I think it's worth just taking a look at how this is going to affect us, and I think there's a lot of good arguments in favor of it. I think there's some maybe emotional arguments against it, so that may offer us an opportunity to try it out for a while, and my guess would be in 5 years, everybody think it works great and we can make it permanent. So that's all I've got, Mayor. Thank you.
Further comments? Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know if I was chair, I can't remember, but I was on Policy and Finance the last time we worked on this and really got a deep dive. We had a lot of public input and so on. And I will tell you that my conclusion out of that, I voted in favor of dropping the residency requirement back then. What I saw in part was, especially with the environment that Deputy Mayor Duncan has described now, where nobody else has it, it's like we have to make you live here. You know, I want us to sell Topeka, and I think Topeka sells well, and in a way that residency requirement gets in the way. When you look at the hometowns of all those wonderful, successful, award-winning folks from WTI earlier this evening, they were from Burlingame. You know, we are a metro city. We're in the middle of at least a 50-mile radius, if not a 100-mile radius of folks for whom we're the city center. And so I get it to want to insist that people live here, but I think also then in the last couple of years where it's gone virtual, and a couple of people touched on that already, you know, if we can cut things loose to where we're just talking about what job do we want you to do? Does it require that you be within 30 minutes on an on-call basis? Okay, then you need to be close, but if it doesn't, live where you're going to live. If your job requires that you really be familiar with the neighborhoods, like a community engagement type job, for instance, where, and maybe not even that one, but where you know it and your kids go to school here and you do your shopping in Topeka and so on. If there's a reason that you need to know it from the streets, okay. As I read it, I thought I agreed with everything that the committee did in terms of city manager still here, department heads in the county, and everybody else. Frankly, I didn't see any reason to even limit it to Kansas, particularly with the Kansas City metro area so close, and people that we know actually who've lived on the other side of Kansas City and been here every day and been wonderful employees for a long time in the city as well as elsewhere. It just, the time has passed for that, I would suggest. I ended up also really being struck by, I read the minutes of the committee, and Councilwoman Nager had suggested that maybe we needed to look at incentives. And that got talked about before, and we're at a point right now in the budget where we're looking at changing our compensation levels, putting some money into it. And so the more I thought about it, I thought, you know, the time might be perfect to do that as well. And so I ended up just taking what you all had done and doing an alternate proposal that included an $800 residency bonus once a year, maybe the 1st of December, for employees that live in Topeka, using the same description that the committee's ordinance described in terms of how you validated the ordinance or the residency. And then just kind of cutting even the remainder pieces that the committee had in a little bit loose, but instead, if there was a need for somebody to be in, that needs to be in the job description, but it doesn't need to be in our ordinance. And if there is a negotiation needed for how soon someone could be here or how that relationship would work, it can be on the onboarding paperwork that HR does. I think our ordinance can be, can do what that committee said, but even cut the few strings that were left in that loose and maybe consider that incentive thing that we've talked about on and off for some time. So I passed around copies. I'm not going to read it through unless somebody wants me to, but it brief, and it picked up on what the committee did. So I'm open for questions or challenges. Thanks for listening.
Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel a little redundant because this is basically what Councilman Dobler said, but I feel like he read my mind. So I felt very much the same way, and what I got from constituents is that if I pay somebody with my tax dollars, I want them to spend that money here. And I think that the time has come that we need to look at more flexible options, although that would be ideal. We don't live in an ideal world. And I think that the moratorium is a good idea, that we should go ahead and know that as the world has changed up to this point, it will likely change into the future. To revisit this would not be a bad thing. I think one thing I really want to go ahead and something that Councilman Kell had mentioned earlier, the bubble. As far as department heads, it kind of goes back to that. That's what I've heard from constituents is that if we're paying someone a more sizable salary from our tax dollars, that they want to see that person installed in our community. And to be in our community, being in Shawnee County is really important to us. Being in the county lines, it's not necessarily a distance thing, it's that symbolic and, quite honestly, that financial commitment to, I'm a part of this community, I'm a daily part of this community. This is where I spend my free time, and I'm a representative of where we are. So those are just some more of the thoughts. I was on the Policy and Finance Committee in 2021 and have been a part of this continued conversation. At our last meeting, Deputy Mayor has done a great job of putting together this proposal. And unfortunately, Councilwoman Valdivia Alcalo could not be there. And I voiced the same concern that, hey, I know that there might be disagreement as we come to the governing body, but that it's worth discussing. And I really appreciate all of the input that's been happening amongst all of us, because it does seem to mirror very much what we've been talking about in the concerns and the opportunity for growth. Those discussions seem to be happening within this larger body. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Lesser. And Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a kind of a couple things, to a certain extent, as a city, we kind of are talking out of both sides of our mouth, where one side we have a policy where you have to live in the county to work here, et cetera, as we're talking about. And the other side of our mouth, we've been pretty successful with getting remote employees to move here to work remotely and live in Topeka, which means they're living somewhere else, or they're living here, but they're working somewhere else. So I just think, no different than in business, you either have to evolve and you have to be open to what's changing in the environment. Otherwise, you're going to lag behind. And the world's changing. Technology's changing it. COVID has shown so many of us, not only remote workforce, but reduction in, the need for capital investment in buildings and what have you by different companies and stuff like that. And apparently, what did you say, us and Wyandotte? Apparently us and Wyandotte think that we're smarter than everybody else in the whole state of Kansas, apparently. And I'm kind of one of those guys that I don't hold that value of, as my dad would say, the guy who, the guy or gal who marries the person who's on their fourth marriage must think a whole hell of a lot about themselves, because he's going to change everything. And that's kind of where I look at this a little bit is I don't know what we figured out or that they haven't, that everybody else seems to be going the different direction. So I'm open to different plans. I certainly think the city manager, the department heads, et cetera, those positions need to live in the county. But the world is changing, and education is changing. I mean, not just here, but you can live in Topeka, Kansas, and get your law degree from St. Louis University while you're living here. So anyway, I think we're going to miss out on employees. Other people are going to take them. There's an employee shortage right now. There's the great retirement, and I think we have to be prepared to pivot to something along this committee's plan. To otherwise, we're going to lag behind. It's just that simple. I see that in my business and my industry here, and we're no different than that. So that's all I got.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I really appreciate all the work the committee did on this, and I had a long conversation with Deputy Mayor Duncan when he was actually recovering from COVID on this, and he's obviously done a lot of research on this. But my issue, and the same issue I had last time, is this generated more calls and emails than any other issue a few years ago. And now, to be honest, I've only gotten 2 calls about this at this point. Now, maybe after there's coverage of this and stuff, maybe I'll start to get more calls and stuff. But my constituents at the time were loud and clear that they wanted the people who pay the tax dollars to live and spend the money. Most of them prefer they actually live in the city limits. But they were kind of willing to concede, well, we already had the county limits, so that was fine to keep it that way. But that said, I do like what Councilman Dover said about perhaps putting a moratorium on this, and maybe that would kind of, maybe that would give time to almost treat this like a pilot program, I guess, to see how this worked. And as we know from what we've seen the last few years with COVID and all this shutdown, the world can change in a few years. So I'll be certainly listening and to emails, listening to phone calls I get and reading emails I get from my constituents on this. But I did have a couple of questions, if I may, Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I noticed that it was changed from a public, in the actual resolution, it says employees employed in a critical response time position as defined by the Director of Human Resources, and they struck out public safety position. Can you explain why the reasoning for that, as well as the response time was taken from 30 minutes up to 45 minutes?
Who can answer that? City manager or
Miss Jackie Russell, HR Director, can address that.
Good evening, governing body. The reason why it was changed to 45 minutes is because in our water ASME bargaining unit agreement, the distribution and the water utility employees do have a 45-minute response time if there are critical needs for them to report back. So that's why we recommended the longer time be included in that ordinance.
For uniformity more than anything?
Yes.
So, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Jackie. I guess I didn't think about that a little bit, but, so what I did was, okay. So because one of the 7 agreements we had a longer time, we decided to take all the critical response times to that same time. I mean, I guess if that's the reasoning, I would say, water main starts breaking, it's one thing if, if there's a mass shooting incident, I want the police, frankly, closer than 45 minutes. It seems like it's apple and oranges here.
So we built ourselves a trap door. If you look at the next sentence, which also says, unless a shorter response time is required at the discretion of the city manager, which then allows those department heads to go to our city manager and say, actually, I need this position to have a response time of 20 minutes. And then at that point, the city manager can go back and say, okay, I hereby decree that job, you're a 20-minute job. So that's the trap door we built for ourselves to both make it uniform, but give ourselves a way to get around that on those key positions, emergency positions.
Okay, yes, thank you for that, Deputy Mayor. I did see that. I guess my issue is, are we going to have a line of employees waiting at the city manager's door? It seems like it's going to make the city manager the judge of every single one of these. I mean, it's easier to say public safety will be 30 minutes instead of making the city manager kind of adjudicate all this individually.
I mean, I don't have a great answer to that, except that's kind of their job. I mean, at some point, they're the individual we're going to hire to make those tough decisions and be the quote-unquote bad guy, if you will, and dictate that. I don't think it'll be abused too much. I think if you ask each department head and our police and fire chiefs right now, they could probably rattle off pretty quick the specific positions they have in mind that they'd add to that list. And it probably accounts for several dozen employees, probably less than 100. Give or take overall. So it's not a huge component of our city staff.
Okay, Mayor, if I could, just one last thing.
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. My last thing, and usually this is something we talk about in executive session, but since we're talking about this here, I'll just be honest. We know we're going to be negotiating union contracts here very soon, and frankly, we have some unions that are wanting huge raises over the next 3 years. Here we are unilaterally giving something away without getting any concessions at all. I'm just being honest about this, right? It's guys that we like, friends of ours and everything, but it's just like, when Bill Self plays another basketball team, he can be best friends with the coach, but when it's game time, we're gonna each do the best they can for their respective teams. And in this case, my team is the taxpayers. What are we going to do then? I mean, we're relaxing something, and frankly, we've seen that when we asked for any concessions, even back in the depths of COVID, we asked for a 3% cut, and my gosh, you'd have thought we were asking for $10,000 taken from everybody. They couldn't give out a 3% even for a few months. I will say WPC unions, they were the one union that agreed to do that. And I will always remember that. But I guess my point is, just being honest here, with the unions that I believe are in favor of this, what are they going to offer us in return?
Well, that's a question that won't be answered tonight, I don't think. And I'm not sure that we really want to have much more in the way of that discussion right now. Councilman Carroll.
Now on the discretion of like you said, city manager, where the people could, the department heads could go, are we going to grandfather everyone in their current position in that situation? Because that can be used as a way to dismiss someone, that they're under. Now, like I say, if they promote up and that's a requirement, I get that. But if they're in their current position and they live in, let's say, Silver Lake, and the response time is 20 minutes, but they can't get to their department by that 20 minutes, we're going to release that employee now? Because
Currently, unless they're violating our current city policy, everybody lives in the county. Every employee who works for the city currently shouldn't face that issue as of today.
But you said that the department heads could go to the city manager and change that time from the 45 minutes to a lower time.
Correct, but right now, every city employee lives within that distance. If they're all following the rules today, there should not be a single city employee that doesn't live within the required time in those positions to get here. If they choose to move, if we change this policy, then they will be disqualified from continuing to hold that specific position, and they will know that before they make that decision.
So if someone lives, let's say, in Rossville, and the department head wants that person to have a 15-minute response time, and the city manager approves it, are we going to have to tell that person that lives in Rossville that now they have to move to the inside that 15-minute bubble, or we have to let them go? I'm saying at their current position, are we going to grandfather every single person in their current position in their residency right now, so if there is a change in that time frame
Right.
by a department head?
My two answers, we can certainly have that discussion, but it's not an issue now in those positions. So anyone it shouldn't be an issue moving forward. I guess that's the best answer. But I can talk to staff about if there's a way to address that.
That's my only fear, someone using that as a way to dismiss an employee or try to finagle something by not, if you're in your current position, you should be grandfathered in. Right. And then if you decide to move up and there's a requirement, then yes, now you have to adhere to the requirement. But I don't see why we should even allow a current employee to be punished in the future for,
But just
for not.
we have almost 1,400 city employees, and the number of those employees would be pretty small to begin with. They're mostly police, fire, some public works. It's not a huge pool of current employees that are even going to have that issue.
For example, my uncle was a wastewater, lived in Rossville. He had to have a response time to deal with things at the wastewater plant. If all of a sudden now his department head says, I want to take you from 45 minutes down to 15 minutes because of, we need to react to this. All of a sudden it's like, okay, are we going to sit there and say now that you're outside that 15-minute bubble, sorry, we're going to let you go, or you have to move with inside the bubble on your on-call days or whatever. It's just, to me, that's almost like punishing a person. If the department head goes to the city manager, what you're saying is now would be the person to dictate what the time frames are. I say we grandfather every single employee in their current residency if we do adopt this. And then if things change, like their position, then we can then make them adhere to the new position.
I understand. Well, staff and I will talk about that. I don't think that's a problem now, but we'll have a conversation about if there's a way to fix that.
City manager?
Real quickly, Mayor. All the positions at the current time that require response time, the employees meet the requirements of the department head. And then as this would roll out, the position descriptions will be updated with current times and stuff for those specific positions. But currently, I do not foresee a department head changing response time for a unit or whatever, but that a grandfather clause may be something that has to be looked at for current employees.
Covers our reins,
Councilwoman Hiller, but before you start.
Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to keep clear here that let's not just work on assumptions or worst case scenario, because I don't think, I have to give credit to department heads that they're not going to go out there and arbitrarily make life difficult for their people. Now, maybe I'm pie in the sky, but I just have not seen that as an employee for the city of Topeka, first at the police department and now as an employee as a city councilman. I just don't see that as a reason to suppose that now some new change is going to incentivize department heads who want to make life difficult for subordinates. I just don't see that happening. I think the idea of having accountability from the department head through the city manager is something we have to keep in mind. Department heads can work independently, but they have a boss, and that's the city manager. And the city manager brings those issues to us as well. I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong, that people are going to try and fly under the radar and put all these little scenarios into place where now I'm going to get even with Brett Kell. Now I'm going to change these times arbitrarily with no justification. There's recourse for someone who might try to do that to another employee, and those are things that we have to keep in mind. I just want to keep this conversation going in the direction of real life situations and not the blue moon situation that might show up that we still are responsible to address and take care of as a body. Councilwoman Heller.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to reflect for a moment on this very discussion that we're having and help us back up a little bit. If you think about it, we've been focusing on outcomes-based budgeting and performance-based employment practices. And one of the reasons I suggested simply cutting loose the mention of the time in the ordinance at all is because it really ought to be, if there is a job need, just like if you need to be able to lift more than 10 pounds or whatever, if there is a need for that response time, it ought to be in the job description so somebody knows about it when they first consider the employment. That's an HR kind of thing. City manager shouldn't have to be involved in all those decisions, and neither should we. So saying that if there is one, we expect you to find it in the job description and go along with it, to me, brought the issue out, but didn't go any farther than we as policymakers needed to. Just kind of cutting it loose with this process of getting up and then looking at being able to get employees here. And so I want to encourage you as you think about it. All I did was just cut some things loose a little farther than they had to get them the decision-making where it ought to be, if it ought to be in HR or between the supervisor and the employee. And we don't need to try and regulate it only to have people run up against it. It seemed like maybe this was a good time to at least consider that. I also want to pitch, we talked about the police department this evening with 31 vacancies, I think. Overall, what's our vacancy number? I can't find Jack.
It's in the 30s.
Yeah, 31, 38.
For the whole city is what I meant. I mean, we are needing to hire. We need engineers. We need people to work in the wastewater treatment plant. We need firefighters. We need police. When we talked about this before, the issue was we wanted to hire quality people. We wanted them to want to move here. And we also have made it a priority as a body to diversify our workforce. So we want the best possible employees, and we also want to attract diverse individuals to stay here or move here. And I really want to encourage people to be thinking about that, those top priorities that we've set as a body as we consider this issue.
Councilman Cap.
You kind of brought up that, we have good leadership. I believe we do, but right when I first got on, we had what was termed a rogue department head. And so then they were let go. And then with the city manager, we don't know what experience they might bring in. That, let's say they came from Chicago and their wastewater was a response time of 20 minutes. I just think for the betterment of our employees, especially our long-term employees who have been with us, a grandfather clause is not that much to ask to sit there and say, yes, you fall under here, so this way there's no arbitrary change in the time frames that now someone gets disqualified for their job or required to move and have to choose, do I stay where I've lived for 20 years and raise my kids and where they went to school, or do I keep my job? We're talking about trying to retain employees. That's the reason I just want to make sure that our current employees are covered. So if someone arbitrarily changes this time frame, that these current employees are covered, and that the aspect is if they do change positions and there is a requirement, that then now they have to adhere to that requirement or possibly file some type of waiver or something like that, just to maintain the residents, where it's at. So,
Councilman Lesser and then Deputy Mayor.
I think just a couple things to follow up. We can go down a million rabbit holes here on this right now. I think there are a couple things though that do come into play that does become in regards to, you know, personal decisions and personal accountability. If you decide that you're going to want to climb the ladder, whether it's in water, whether it's in fire, whether it's in law enforcement, whatever it is, and you have aspirations to be police chief, fire chief, whatever it is, you may have to make that decision at some point in time, no different than anybody else, you know, has to make at some point in time. And I can tell you numbers of people in there again in the business world that have decided, I want to stay in Topeka, Kansas. I'm turning this promotion down to go to Chicago because this is where I want to live and this is what I want to do. And so if the opportunity comes to that you want to have one of those positions, then you're going to have to make a decision, you know. But we as a body, I think, have a responsibility to dictate, you know, what positions do have to live in the county, what do have to live in the, you know, whatever it is. And that's the ground rules going in that, you know, going into it. And if you want to go down if you want to follow the track to go up that's something. I mean, it wasn't that very long ago that we had a possible city manager that had to make the decision whether or not he wanted to be considered for city manager years ago, and he didn't want to move his family. You know, that was the decision he made. So there is some personal accountability on the ground rules that we set in place for those type of positions that have a higher responsibility. But other than that, like I said, I don't anticipate us, if we go this direction, trying to make it harder to get employees or harder to we can't fill all our positions right now. So the last thing we're going to do is try to handcuff our department heads to reduce time, response time to force them to come in. We're just not going to do that. But if we do say this is a position that you need to be here, then we're going to have, you know, HR, the chiefs, you know, they're going to have data to back why you need to be here in 15 minutes, and here's why, period, in the conversation, you know. That's all I have. There is still some personal accountability in regards to making decisions. You got to live with what's the most thing that's the most important to you. You know, we all have to make those choices sometimes.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll see if I can wrap this up. We knew this would be lively discussion when we brought it forward, and there may still be more as we finally take a vote. I'll address a couple things that help move us forward, and then we can be done with this. But I will address Councilmember Emerson's union comment in the sense that because we discussed it publicly, externally, and internally, and you do go back and forth on these decisions about, you know, things you try to use as bargaining chips in those negotiations and but what we came down on the side of, at the end of the day, we have as many non-union employees in the city who at times deserve that consideration. And whether that was the right decision or not, it was discussed publicly in one of our meetings, and that's kind of how we ended up on that side of it. I will also point out in this discussion about our concern, some of Councilmember Kell's concerns is, the one thing to keep in mind is the majority of the positions we are discussing are union employees, and we cannot pass a rule of this governing body that supersedes or circumvents any of our union contracts. And a lot of those concerns are covered under those union contracts with water, police, fire, most of them who fall under that. So while that may apply and we may have some of those concerns with non-union, most of those are already covered, and anything we do here by law, we cannot circumvent those contracts. So we'll take a look at the majority of where those employees fall under to see if they're covered and have that extra protection of what we're talking about. As this is a discussion evening, I don't think we actually need a motion to take into effect Councilmember Dobler's desire to put a 5-year cap on this deal. I think we can put it in before he brings to us a cap of December 31st, 2027, which is 5 years and a few extra months of this year. that this thing would sunset for this body to have to consider again before it moves forward. I don't think we need a motion that night. I think we can just do it now when it comes forward and have that part taken care of. I'll end with this. I have had no more lively conversations on this issue than anyone than with my own mother. She grew up in this city. In fact, I grew up in the same house she lived in. I am a native Topecan. I am born here. I tell people I'll probably die here and be buried here. I have a business here. My wife has a business here. I will talk until I'm blue in the face to convince everybody on this planet that they should move to Topeka, Kansas. I have heard from her. That's not my house. I have heard from her as much as my own internal struggle of what is our responsibility to spend taxpayers' dollars to pay people that live within these city limits. And that is a very real concern and thought from our citizens that is very valid. But I have leaned, especially as I've gotten on this council, as to me a higher concern and priority is to make sure that I'm hiring the best people I can to serve the people of Topeka in those positions. And if that means we have to make some of these concessions to do that, then that is where I've fallen down, even if my mother at times still wants to actively tell me that maybe it's not the best policy, but I think I'm wearing her down just a little bit, I hope. So I want everyone to know that this is a discussion that I have had in my own family for several years now as we've talked about it and gone through it, and I've tried to look at every variable and the impact it has on everybody, and so it has been thought out, and there will be those who agree and those who disagree, but it really has been done with what we hope is the best interest of not just our employees, but the citizens of Topeka and how to best serve them here at City Hall. So with that, Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next one.
Well, it's like 10 seconds.
Go ahead, Mr. Cowell.
I think there's confusion. What I'm saying is the grandfather would be for the current employees in current position. If they move out of that position, they lose the grandfather. That's all I'm saying is current employees, current position, once this goes into effect. And after that, once they move out, they have to adhere to any other changes.
Okay. Thank you. Lively discussion. Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to tell the deputy mayor that mother knows best, and he needs to listen to his mother. Thank you.
That didn't help me.
Let's see if she commented.
Thank you. I would like to visit with the deputy mayor about Councilman Dobler's idea, suggestion. I have some questions about that as well, but we'll move on from this discussion tonight.
You can discuss it at his house.
We'll move on to non-action item.
C is discussion related to the City of Topeka 2023 operating budget.
Mr. City Manager?
Mayor, governing body, this should be what we anticipate is the last presentation from finance on the department budgets. Before we start, I do have Adam, will you be able to wrap it up within 45 minutes?
Yep.
Okay.
You want to check to make sure they can hear, come down there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I could.
Another thing we want to check and make sure, Adam, that you can be heard from a mic down there. We had that issue last Tuesday. So anybody online, if you can't hear him, please let us know so that he can move to another
So
spot.
give us a mic check.
Mic check, mic check.
Earlier it sounded pretty good.
All right, so we'll have Judge Ladani come up, our first department. Again, good evening, governing body, Mr. Mayor. So to start off, and you can come up here, with the municipal court, and this is a budget of $1.9 million. 76% of this is personnel. Most of the increases in this budget from 2022 are related to inflation. It's a relatively flat budget. The FTE count is 20, which is also the same as the 2022 budget. And with that, I'll turn it over to Judge Thani.
Thank you, Adam. Good evening, governing body, city manager,
Ms. Feeney, we got you out tonight. Good to see you. I don't have much to add. Municipal court budget is pretty static. We know what we need to operate. No material changes for the 2023 budget. A couple of the programming highlights that I did want to cover, if this body recalls last year, I approached you about adding a supervised probation fee to recoup some of the costs that our taxpayers were footing for, whether it was drug tests or mouth swabs, et cetera. I ran some numbers, and since about November of last year through August of this year, 164 fees were assessed, and so that's about $16,400. I don't get a lot of time here in front of this body, which, it's not a bad thing for the most part. I'll just leave you with this, and being the judge for 2 years now, you kind of learn about municipal court and the importance of it. And this I learned from one of the Supreme Court justices at one of the CLEs I was at. Municipal court is the body of law that is going to touch the majority of people, everyday people. So whether it's a traffic ticket, whether you're a victim of a crime and you're looking for restitution, whether you're the victim of a battery, this is the place where people go to get justice. And so I want to caveat that with what we do here. I sit here being very proud of our municipal court operation. I feel like people can trust when they come here. They get a fair shake, for lack of a better word. It's a place of justice where you're treated with respect, just and equitably. I think that's just important. We're a small department with a small budget, but we have our hands in a lot of things. Whether we work with TPD, with our alternative sentencing court, we work with Vallejo. We're supposed to have a representative from the VA. We have a CIT officer on that. Our probation division right now is supervising approximately 171 people. Did about 19 pre-sentence investigations last month alone. So just the work that that department is doing, these are things that go unsaid, and so when I have an opportunity, I just need to give props where they're due. Just the pandemic response and being a lot more accessible. We've expanded our Zoom options. We no longer go into the jail. We do that all virtually. Expungements, motions, anything. If we can hear it by Zoom, we're going to allow it. So we've adapted in that way. I'll just leave it with that. And then the final thing you'll see on there is Clean Slate Day. I'm working with Ms. Guade and the interim city manager, and what we're doing right now, we're doing discussions at the grassroots level, meeting with certain demographics, certain community members, and trying to come up with a program that's tailored to what this community needs. We're going to try to do it at the end of this year. As you all know, the court is dealing with some staffing issues internally as well. We'll get through that. But for that big event to take place, we have to have a full prosecutor's office, a full probation office, and a full court. So those discussions are in the works. Community engagement is a big piece of what I believe. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes, sir.
With regards to your staffing needs, is it that we're not competitive wage-wise, or is there other reasons that you're not able to staff?
That's a good question. Some of it is internal, departmental, and we're working on that. A lot of it is also competitive pay. I do a lot of financial affidavits, so I get a good feel of what people are making, whether they're going to Target or they're doing this. So, a court clerk can come in and make anywhere from 15 to 19 an hour. I think now you can go into Target distribution and probably start at 19 an hour. Mm-hmm. Granted, we don't know about benefits, work hours, etc., but, we're working on that. So this wage study is really important to us as well.
I appreciate that. I think you make some good points about the need for a responsive and effective municipal court, because you're right. That's the one that's going to make the most impact on the most people. So thank you for your work.
I appreciate that.
Councilman Kell.
Your Honor, could you get a little bit more into the Clean Slate program, what your guys, what the plan is, or is it too much in its infancy to kind of get into that?
No, we've done it historically, and I can kind of tell you what it's been in the past. The first thing is we have to get a donor, and we come up with a pot of money. And once we have that established, we work with Kansas Department of Revenue Driver Solutions. We work with our court-appointed attorneys. We work with community engagement and Ms. Glaude and get the word out. And we sort of bring everybody into one roof. So we help pay off some fines that are outstanding. If they need to reinstate their license and have some fees, we can help with those costs. We also bring in housing specialists. We have CBK, the credit company there, if people want to get on a payment plan. So it's a one-stop shop for the community. But that said, having an event that large with COVID is something that we think about. That thing starts at 7 a.m. and it goes till 4, and it's body to body for the most part. So it's just something we have to consider, whether people want expungements, whether they want me to do a warrant, amnesty day where you bring in a can of food and $25 and I cut you a break on recalling your warrant. We have a lot of plans in place, or a lot of thoughts. It's just getting the staffing in place and then getting it moving.
And now, is there any program, I've seen a few cities doing this, where they take students now and you extend your day a little bit longer, but you're getting your students, that's, that 4 to 5, let's say, to extend it an hour, but that bubble's exclusively for students. So that way they're not losing classroom time.
Students in terms of internships or?
No, just for like high school students, middle school students, things like that.
Okay. So when high school students or middle school students, we would not have jurisdiction, but a high school student, we will. There's a youth court program connected with a bunch of the high schools. And so as long as it's not a misdemeanor, if it's an infraction or something like that, there's ways for them to get in front of their peers and go through that system and eventually get the ticket dismissed.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Mayor?
Over the last, I guess, within the last year, maybe it was a year and a half, time compressed, especially with COVID, we made some changes in some of the fee structures and drug testing, people paying for their own. Has that worked out for you? Has that done exactly what we intended when we made those changes to get you where you need to be a little bit better?
Correct. We advise people that are going to be put on supervised probation that it's going to be a $100 fee. Haven't heard any blowback from that. And so just being able to recoup approximately $16,500 to cover some of those costs, if it's got to go to the lab or, the urinary analysis cups, it's done what we intended it to do.
Further questions? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. Do we still have mental health court, and if so, how's that going?
Councilmember Ortiz, we do have mental health court. It's called our alternative sentencing court. It's one of 3 in the state of Kansas, so it's something I'm very proud of. Like I mentioned before, a partnership with Vallejo, ourselves, the prosecutor's office, our probation department, the VA, and then a CIT officer. It's very much in full effect. I could probably take an entire council member meeting to tell you the stories, and they would just blow you away. The amount of work that we put in as a group to make sure that these individuals can get the services that they need in the community, and if not get, at least know that those services are offered. It's very intensive. It's week by week. When I'm done with that docket, I'm usually very exhausted. But yeah, it's a very good thing, very proud of it. I've actually had some ideas to talk to Ms. Gretchen Spiker about my next graduation, maybe doing something on City 4 and just sort of highlighting that, because when we give those certificates to those individuals, it's a pretty big deal.
And I brought that forward because it is a great program, and I agree we need to make sure we highlight that so that people know that, because, I've heard, when somebody with mental illness, they just get thrown in court. And man, you've talked about a couple of situations and, been able to handle that in an appropriate way, and or you've been able to lead me and guide me. And so I think it's something that we don't really pat ourselves on the back about, but we should, because you're right, it is a great program, and we have some very good success stories. And I don't care if you take a whole meeting. I won't vote for it, but I don't care if you take a whole meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Further questions for the judge? Councilwoman Hill.
Not a question, but a thank you as well, because I think your willingness to work on the teams and coalitions has been great for the court, but for all of us. Judge has been involved in the legal review team and conversations about the Change Our Culture issues, and that's been really helpful. Y'all will get a report sometime soon.
A little bit over 5 years with the city now, so I guess I'm an old timer.
There you go.
Thank you again.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Adam.
Yep, thank you. Our next department will be our IT department. Our IT department has a budget of about $4.4 million. This is about a 2.5% increase from 2022. Personnel expenses are about 42% of all expenses in the IT budget. The major changes that you'll find are from personnel increases, along with an increase in service licenses in the contractual area. The FTEs is 16, which is the same as last year. And I'll turn it over to Director Biswell for the rest.
Thank you, Adam. Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City Manager. Tonight I'm going to highlight a few IT projects that are currently underway. We're in the process of upgrading 115 telephones and utilities across 4 sites. We're currently developing a digital service portal to host fillable forms. To date, we published 91 forms, and there are 79 forms that are still in draft stage. Next slide. Next, I'm going to touch on some goals and IT projects for next year. We put together a digital transformation working group within the city who will be looking at more efficient use of data and data sharing across departments. We're looking at reducing or eliminating our legacy application footprint. We still have some applications that are 20+ years old and still in use. We'll be upgrading our SharePoint site, which is our intranet. We use our intranet to host internal documents like policies and procedures. We're in the process of developing a new city website. We'll be upgrading telephones at street and traffic next year, and that should finish up our telephone upgrade project. And we'll be upgrading all of our network switches across the city next year. So we're going to be busy. With that, I stand for questions.
Councilman Kell.
Now, I heard a little bit when I first started, and I haven't heard much since then. Are we going more to a cloud-based system, getting rid of the PCs and going more to the hub?
No, not at this time. We're staying with our desktops and our laptops.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions? Well, you got off light.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, our last department for the evening is our Planning and Development Department. The total budget for Planning and Development is $12.2 million. This is primarily made up of the general fund and some various grant funds. The general fund portion is about $2.9 million. Year over year from 22, the general fund portion has increased about 5.8%. The main increase in the overall budget is primarily due to spending down of various grants from COVID. 32% of their total budget is made up of personnel. From 2022 to this budget, we have an increase of 3 FTEs. One of them we've talked about in detail, that was the utilities backflow inspector that moved into the Development Services Division. The other position is a program coordinator funded by the Kansas Department of Aging and Disabilities. And the other one, Director Fyander mentioned this evening, is the program coordinator with Equity Access Shelter. So with that, I'll allow for Director Freinder to explain in more detail.
Thank you, Adam. Good to see you again. I won't prolong this, you've seen enough of me tonight, but I'll touch on a few highlights that impact our budget for next year that haven't already been mentioned. So if we go to the next slide. So by division, we have, start with development services. Again, no change in employee counts there other than the shifting of the funding for backflow. But the budget, continuing our budget to help fund our on-time code updates is critical, so we continue to show that in our 23 budget. Another thing that might have gone under the radar is some savings, potentially by implementing what is known as a plan check fee with our building permit system. This is something that the code actually requires us to do, but because we really didn't have a good way to do that, now we do. We have an online portal. We accept those payments with that application. We won't have as many building permits getting dropped off and not getting paid, basically, at the end. And that's what happened over the last several years. We counted up over $100,000 of permit work that was never paid for, and now that will be defrayed with that institute of the plan check fee. So that's under the radar. The housing services we've talked about with the new equity access shelter FTE. I also touched on briefly up front this evening that we are converting a current position to help with the backlog of property maintenance cases that come through our property maintenance rehab program through Federal Home Loan Bank funding. So that will help move more of those cases along, and we can apply for that grant every couple of years as opposed to every 3 or 4 years. So that's important. In planning, this isn't really a budget impact, but it's just something that will take up a lot of our time. I mentioned about the missing middle and ADU code amendments that we'll be going through starting this fall and into next year. And then also lastly, and this doesn't affect our budget too much, but it is substantial. The transportation planning grants through the MTPO, we had a sizable increase from the feds and states, and so we are definitely looking at putting together a safe routes to school citywide plan, and we can do that now, and that's all grant money. We do have to match that a little bit, and then a transportation-oriented development. What is that? A TOD. We work with the transit agency actually on corridor planning to help with increased density and development along their corridors. And then they increase services along those corridors as well. So it's a step in the right direction, again, to help grow the city and get access to those services. I think you've heard enough from me tonight, so I'm going to stop there.
Questions for Mr. Freinder? No? Thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Adam, that's our last one?
Yeah, that's the last one. And just as a reminder that September 6th is the public hearing for both the budget and the revenue neutral rate. And then the following week is when the budget will be put up for a vote.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Hiller?
The agenda said we would cover the mayor's office and the council office as well this evening. Are we already done with those?
So in the past, we haven't done much with those budgets just because they are generally the same year over year. So we will not be covering those this evening.
20% increase? Shit. Yeah. I'm still bringing sack lunches. So.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to public comment, and there's no one signed up, correct? Okay. We'll move on to announcements then. Pardon? No announcements? Okay, city manager?
Just two things. Redistricting open hearing is set for August 18th So any citizens that would like to weigh in on redistricting, that's your opportunity. And as you're aware, press release went out today on the city manager's candidates that are set for interviews in August.
Okay, thank you. Where is she? There she is. Councilwoman Nager, any announcements?
None this evening, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Dobler.
Normally I'd say none, but I wanted to quickly touch on something. A couple of weeks ago, I had an opportunity to tour the new tech center at the Topeka Shawnee County Public Library. They've converted the second floor. They call it the Level 2 Tech Center. A lot of technology. Drum roll, tech center, yeah. A couple of really cool things. There's a full-fledged video studio there and a podcasting studio, and this is free. You just sign up for it, you get some training, you do it. A lot of opportunities. I think you can go online and do a tour, go in and take a look at it. So if you get a chance, it's a wonderful addition, I think, not only to the library, but to our community. Thank you, Mayor.
So is the podcast called Journal Doper?
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Two quick things. We say this a lot, but orange cones are both a blessing and a curse. It means we're getting things done. It also is very frustrating for folks. I know in a couple spots we have had some water main breaks where we're doing projects, so we've turned detours into new detours. But we're on it, and same with now I-70 closed, which isn't entirely our doing. State gets a little blame, quote unquote, for that one. God bless them. But we appreciate your patience. I guess that's the message tonight. Is I know it's caused some backups in a few spots, but thank you to the Topeka's for driving safe through those areas and being patient. But it does mean we're getting things fixed. Second thing is Friday, 3 o'clock, Holiday Building Policy and Finance Committee is meeting for our first round discussions on the ARPA grants applications that were submitted. I want to reiterate to people we've asked, final decisions will not be made at that meeting. There will be some eliminations, but ones that move forward are not necessarily getting funded, but we'll do for follow-up information and some gathering of stuff we'd like to have to move forward. Our plan, hopefully, if we stay on schedule, as we've said from the start of this process, is to bring something to this body before we get out of October. So we are on pace to do that, but everyone wants to know the first round of those considerations are this Friday at 3 o'clock. Thank you, Mayor.
I want to ask you something, Deputy Mayor. I want to make sure that you mentioned again, we talked about this, the need for us to submit questions to you for the upcoming candidate interview.
Yeah, because I realized I have not done it as I had the UHA. Each of us need to submit, please, as we discussed for part of our interview process for the city manager candidates. Please submit your question to Mr. Bossert so he can start, if you haven't already. I haven't, which is why I realized the other day, oops, I have not done my part. I bet I'm not alone. Maybe I am. My apologies. But yes, in my role as deputy mayor, I guess I need to remind everybody, if you can get that done this week, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Councilman Lesser.
Good.
Good. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. To follow up, tag on Councilman Dobler's comments, they have a 3D printer that you can use also up in that new tech room, and in those video rooms, you can do editing as well. They even mentioned, I got a different tour, but that even small businesses who wanted to work on their stuff there could do that. And that's pretty amazing to have that available that publicly. When to give shout outs, I ended up with 4 neighborhood associations that did their night outs despite the heat. One of them was this weekend rather than last weekend, but it's just fun to see the grassroots efforts, to see kids doing everything from the bag, what do you call them, the paper bags. The resource bags where they have just the hop in the bags and the tether balls and the bouncy houses and throwing a football in just a vacant lot. That's what mine were this year, and it was just really fun to see. Great spirit. I also ended up at the Plaza for Eats and Beats on Thursday night, and then for just to stop by when the movie was running on Friday night. Huge crowds. If people haven't been down, very diverse, all over town, kids and dogs and families and individual, everything. It's really hopping, really going well. Last but not least, the mowing program is continuing. It has been focused on our low and moderate income neighborhoods, but truthfully, anyone citywide, if you see a tall yard, pull over and offer to mow it or ask them if they need some help. Our goal is really just to, this first year of the 5 years of Change Our Culture, is to get everybody mowed, ideally on their own or with the help of someone whom they could pay or who could volunteer, so that we begin to move forward in taking care of ourselves and each other in this community. If people want to check into the resources that we've lined up through Change Our Culture of Property Maintenance, Community Engagement has set up a hotline. The number is 368-9530. That's 368-9530. Anyone can call and check what the resources are, even no matter where they live in town, just to check in and see what those resources are, or to get some ideas. So encourage people to pass the word. Just takes all of us. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing other than wanting to wish our first grandchild, who just turned 15 years old today, Adrian Michael Lehman, a happy birthday. And we love you, Mijo. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz. Nada? Okay. Councilman Emerson.
Anyway, it doesn't matter nothing tonight. Thank you.
Councilman Kell.
I've reflected on pretty much the last 8 months. I want to thank the council, the mayor, the interim city manager, the support staff, department heads, and city employees. It's taken me 8 months to finally start feeling comfortable in this position, where I kind of know what's going on. I'm still learning. Still get some side conversations where people are, informing me on things. But I want to say thank you to everyone that's, dragging me along, sometimes kicking and screaming. But learning this job is not something you do in that time between being elected and being sworn in. So it's like I said, I've started to finally feel comfortable, and that's been 8 months. But 8 months ago, we had a thwarted attempted school shooting at one of the 501 middle schools. And with schools going back in session, I want to bring up the premise of that whole, you see something, say something, you hear something, say something, you read something, say something. If you don't feel right about something, say something. We need to keep our kids safe. The schools should be the one place that they should feel safest in this world. And loved the most by their friends and their teachers, and it needs to be a safe place for them. So again, if there's any information you have, say something. And I just want to bring that up since schools just started here in the area for all the grades, and I just want our school districts in our area to be, or every school district, to be safe as it possibly can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. That's a good reminder. I appreciate that reminder. And on top of that, make sure you observe that 20-mile-per-hour speed limit in those school zones. I don't know how many people I honk at as they fly by me, but I hope the Topeka Police Department will do what they can to enforce that, because I'd hate to see someone get injured just because they were a little late for coffee or something. So I appreciate that. And Councilman, I'm trying to slow him down.
Easy, big fella. There's a
couple other things there. But anyway, Councilman Dobler took some of my thunder with that level 2, as well as Councilwoman Hiller. But that is a fantastic place. If you haven't had a chance to go, take some time to go see what it offers to the youth, and it's from 14 up, and kids can go that are younger than that if they're accompanying with an adult. So there are a lot of things that they can do in that space, and that really takes on a whole different idea of what a library offers a community. So kudos to, oh no, congratulations, excuse me, to the library staff for putting that together. Also, there's one thing I want to make an announcement on, and I'm surprised Deputy Mayor didn't bring it up as a new employee. The League of Municipalities is having their annual essay contest for 7th grade essay contest. They have a contest and it's titled My Home, My City, My Home. And the kids can submit their narratives and they can win up to $250. And there is a link site that you can go to, www.lkm.org/essay contest. lkm.org/essay contest. There is a deadline, that's November 23rd. So maybe you'll get a chance to read all those in your new position. If there is no further announcements, we have need for 2 executive sessions.
10 o'clock rule.
Where are we? 9:45? Well, we'll probably have to make a motion to go beyond 10 o'clock for these executive sessions.
Shall we make that motion now?
So moved.
Okay.
To extend beyond 10?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
None opposed?
None opposed?
Don't worry.
Sylvia, you got a friend now. Okay. So, Mary, if you will read the parameters.
Okay. First executive session, the motion would be to recess into executive session not to exceed 15 minutes to discuss employer-employee negotiations relating to WPC as authorized by KSA 75-4319B3. The following staff to assist the governing body in its deliberations will be interim city manager William Cochran and any other staff he deems necessary. Is there a motion to that effect?
Okay, you've heard the need. Motion
Okay.
to executive session by
Is there a
Councilwoman
second?
Miller. Is there a second? Second by Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Sylvia? Neil? Okay.
You want to be Sylvia.
Okay, we'll move right into executive session with no recess.
Okay.
Okay, we've come out of our first executive session. There no action has been taken. It's been determined that we do not need a second executive session, so if there's no further business to come before this body, I adjourn this meeting.
Thanks for watching tonight's City Council meeting. A recording of the meeting will replay at 1 p.m. on Wednesday. All of our recorded council and committee meetings from this week will replay starting at 9 every Saturday and Sunday morning. You can find all of our video content on the City of Topeka's YouTube page.